where our mains Edge 45 comes to their rescue. We have very limited time between prelims and mains. Very dedicated guidance, answer writing, continuous mentorship.
Good marks, good rank is equivalent to answer writing practice.
So it's like a proper lab, as the name itself says, where you can experiment, learn and excel.
So it's relevant, it's specific, it's well researched, and it's in a proper framework which you can use in answers.
And this is where mentoring plays a very important role. So that will be one aspect of mentoring where faculty will continuously engage with students who are enrolled.
The idea here is not to impart knowledge and content to you. If you people are writing mains examination, I'm dead sure that you people have already done that hard part. And we'll be covering them from the perspective of what questions UPSC has asked and what it can possibly ask related to those particular schemes or themes in the coming years.
The biggest mistake in UPSC prep, thinking that more material equals more marks. You don't need more material, you need a system that works. At Vision IS Delhi, our GS Foundation course is built to move you from confusion to clarity. Here's how. Right sequence. We teach subjects in an order that actually makes sense. So you don't just memorize, you understand. Integrated current affairs. No more separate notes. Use PT 365 and Mains 365 to link news directly to your syllabus. Early testing. Don't wait for the exam to find your gaps. We test and give one-on-one feedback from day one. Stop counting study hours and start counting your progress. Targeting UPSC 2027, build the foundation that toppers trust. Upcoming Delhi batches live and online available. Karol Bagh 8 May 11 am, 14th May 8 am, 22nd May 5 pm, 27th May 2 pm, 29th May 11 am. And GTB Nagar 15th May 6 pm, 22nd May 8 am. To register, visit our website or call us on the given numbers.
Morning. So in today's session, this will be more like a continuation of a previous session I took few days ago. So a few days ago I took a session where the goal was that how can we convert any topic into like an answer ready framework, that how can we write a good answer based on a topic. And I gave few examples in the previous session from all GS 1, 2, 3, 4. In today's class, I will continue on that, and again, because the main purpose of this session here is that how can we write good answers. So in this class, I'm going to focus upon two topics of paper 3, Science and Technology and Environment, and I will give you a general framework, but I always feel that unless we have concrete examples, any general framework will not work. And by the way, that goes for you also. That, for example, when after the class, students come to me and ask a question, कि सर आंसर कैसे लिखें, तो मैं हमेशा उनको ही बोलता हूँ पहले लिख के लेके तो आओ, फिर मैं बताऊँगा मैं, right? So even if I give you some general framework, general ज्ञान, it is not at all helpful unless you actually start practicing it. So, for example, what I expect you to do after this session, that in the end I have given few questions of science and tech and few questions of environment, like few important themes from current affairs. And I would want you to write, take your time, and I would want you to write answer on those themes, and I think that can be helpful, okay? So let's start the session. I'm going to also get this slide uploaded in the video description by evening, hopefully, today. Right? So we are going to do science and tech and environment, and let's directly jump into the topics. How I'm going to approach first, let's start with that. I'm going to talk about, we know the syllabus. What are the common mistakes which people do in science and tech and environment, and how those mistakes can be avoided, and how can we write good answer. And we will see this with a lot of examples from previous year questions. And I would expect you to then write answer based on current affairs theme. A lot of things, excessive information dump without any type of linkages with the actual demand of the question. Very generic introduction, like starting में ही आप बोर हो जाओ पढ़ के, very generic introduction, that is not going to help you. एक जैसे for example, I have always felt that a golden rule in writing introduction is that if you know some current affairs context of the topic which has been asked, then always start with that. That gives an immediate hook to the examiner that you are a well-read candidate, you have been reading newspaper, and you know the, again, it will not work in each and every question. Some questions will be static questions with no basis of current affairs. That will be quite rare in paper 3, but of course, many such questions in paper 1 or even in paper 2, there can be questions like this, and of course in paper 4. But if you do have current affairs hook, always start with that. That's always a good idea to do that, okay? A bigger problem, and you will find that in paper 3 last few years, students are not getting very good marks. अब देख लेना, जैसे अगर आप 2017-18 के मार्क्स देखोगे, लोगों के 130-140 नंबर आ रहे हैं, और अभी मार्क्स देखोगे 100 नंबर मुश्किल से क्रॉस कर पा रहे हैं. इवन एमंग टॉपर्स, टॉप 100 का देख लेना, 100 नंबर मुश्किल से क्रॉस कर पा रहे हैं. तो दो कारण है. एक तो ऑफ कोर्स यूपीएससी ने थोड़ा सा चेकिंग टफ करा है. दे टारगेट सर्टेन पेपर्स, उनका अगेन डिसमैंडलिंग द ट्रेंड वाला जो है, जो इस बार प्रीलिम्स में किया उन्होंने, सो दैट डिसमैंडलिंग द ट्रेंड तो उनका चलते रहता है कि दे विल डिसमैंडल द वेल एस्टैब्लिश्ड ट्रेंड. बट देयर इज वन मोर रीजन. आप 2016-17 के क्वेश्चंस देखो, थोड़े जेनेरिक क्वेश्चन है. व्हाट इज फूड प्रोसेसिंग, ये बहुत ही जेनेरिक टाइप के क्वेश्चन है. अभी आप देखोगे स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चंस हैं विच आर डिमांडिंग मोर एनालिसिस, एंड अभी भी लोग वही जेनेरिक आंसर लिख रहे हैं. सो वन ऑफ द रीजन, another reason which I think that students are not getting good marks is because writing generic points where UPSC is very specific in what it is asking. And I will show you with examples that what do I mean by when I make that particular statement. Okay, so no analytical layer, that is a problem. Forget about the answer writing. Even the way UPSC is asking question, just say, look at how they do not care that much about the keywords of the syllabus. You'll find that in paper 1 there are questions of science and tech. Last year a question tha that how can AI help in geographical information system, something like that. Generally you read about AI in science and tech, but they're asking this in paper 1. Or last to last year there was a question that how Purvaiya jo hai, that affects the culture. So think about how geography and culture is being interlinked. So जब वो क्वेश्चन में जब इस चीज को नहीं कर रहे हैं, इस पे फोकस, तो हम आंसर में हम क्यों कर रहे हैं? तो एक दूसरा प्रॉब्लम जो ये होगा दैट वी डू नॉट ऐड डिफरेंट डायमेंशंस, इंटरकनेक्टेड डायमेंशंस इन द आंसर. वी आर थिंकिंग इन साइलोस, वी आर नॉट एडिंग डिफरेंट डायमेंशंस. एंड बाय द वे, दिस इज नॉट जस्ट अ सजेशन फॉर साइंस एंड टेक और एनवायरमेंट, दिस इज सजेशन अक्रॉस ऑल द paper 1, 2, 3 and 4, that even if there is a question of geography, try to add more dimension. Do not limit yourself only to geographical dimension. Try to add more dimension. And for that matter polity, or for that matter even in answers of paper 4. बहुत बार क्वेश्चन के implicit demands होंगे, and वो implicit demands जो हैं, वो जो verb है, जो directive verb है क्वेश्चन का, उससे आता है. बट लोगों को बहुत अगेन क्लैरिटी नहीं है कि जो डायरेक्टिव्स हैं उसको हम कैसे यूटिलाइज करें. जैसे इफ द क्वेश्चन का डायरेक्टिव डिस्कस है वर्सेस क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन है, दिस आर टू डिफरेंट डायरेक्टिव्स, एंड अकॉर्डिंगली फिर हमारा स्ट्रक्चर कैसे चेंज होगा, हमारा कंक्लूजन कैसे चेंज होगा, वो क्लैरिटी होना बड़ा ज़रूरी है. दैट व्हाट इज द एग्जैक्ट वर्ब ऑफ द क्वेश्चन, एंड बेस्ड ऑन दैट हाउ डू वी राइट द आंसर. ओके, what is the exact syllabus of science and tech? Let's directly jump to that. Let's first discuss science and tech, and then we will discuss environment. Both of these topics will have about 6 to 7 questions. So आप ऐसे समझ लो, 4 questions for science and tech, 3 questions of environment, right? And उसी हिसाब से आप फिर marks भी देख सकते हो. This is the exact syllabus: science and technology, developments, applications in everyday life, achievements of Indians in science and technology, indigenization of technology, and then certain keywords are given: IT, space, computers, biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, intellectual property, right? Few keywords which are not given, but there will be questions on those keywords, such as जो पूरा energy वाला topic है, that becomes a very important topic. And ये जो topic है, energy वाला topic, this sits at वेरी गुड कन्वर्जेंस बिटवीन साइंस एंड टेक एंड एनवायरमेंट. लाइक एनवायरमेंट में भी फिट कर सकते हैं, साइंस टेक में भी इसको फिट कर सकते हैं. न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी, डिफेंस टेक्नोलॉजी, हेल्थ केयर, environmental technology, again that will be covered in environment. But when we talk about, let's say, some environmental problem, air pollution, climate change, and we talk about the technological solution to solve those problems, जैसे 2 साल पहले क्वेश्चन था कि फ्रेश वाटर स्कार्सिटी है and give 3 technologies which can fulfill this, which can overcome this problem, and also write some limitations of these 3 technologies, right? So, wo ek question that is like we are talking about a socio-environmental problem, and then we are thinking about technological solution based on that. Okay. Let's go this one by one. We are writing GS answer, and as a result of that, even if there is a question of science and technology, the focus is on the strategic awareness part. The focus is not on the technical depth part. What do I mean by that? There is a question about introduce the concept of AI. Question पूछा UPSC ने. If I start dumping my information that look AI कैसे tokenization use करता है, कैसे neural networks use करता है, कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, उसका ज़रूरत ही नहीं है हमको, because question का second and third demand भी है, and larger focus is on that second and third part, right? तो बहुत important part ये है that this is we are writing GS answer, and in GS answer most of the time the focus is not on the technical depth. The focus is that as a aware candidate, how much information, how much do you actually appreciate the relevance of the topic and how that topic translates to, let's say, public policy, how there is an interconnection between those 2 things. And immediately, ये strategic awareness का यहाँ पे मतलब क्या है? That जो भी technology है, how does it link to social development? How does it link to governance? How does it link to economic growth? And how does it even link to, let's say, national security? I have just covered few of the dimensions, but it can be more things also. इस पे हमारा larger focus होगा. In most of the answer, focus will be largely on these things rather than on this expectation that how much of technical knowledge you have. Do you know India's specific position? Again, this may or may not be important in each every topic, but I will give you example जहाँ पे अगर आप again specific चीजें लिखोगे कि इंडिया का policy response क्या है, right? Regarding a issue, regarding a technology. If you write that in concluding remark somewhere in the main body or even in the introduction, that always will fetch that 0.5 marks extra in the examination. Okay. In many questions, the question will also talk about the ethicality of a technology. So whenever we talk about technology, we always talk about the dual use. The technology can lead to something great, it can lead to something disastrous. And are we aware about that dual use dimension of emerging technology? Jैसे biotechnology, CRISPR-Cas9 है. We can use it for gene therapy, we can use it for genetically engineered virus which can cause a pandemic. Are we aware about such type of things? Or we can use it for designer baby. Do we know about such problems? And in some topics, there will be global context also. Okay. This is a generic framework. Don't think कि ये framework हर answer में काम करेगा. So this is a generic framework which will change depending upon the demand of the question. But in science and tech generally you'll have to have 3 layers. पहला तो layer है what. Define technology clearly, no jargon overload. ये इसका जो point मैंने बताया कि jargon नहीं चाहिए मुझे technical jargon नहीं चाहिए. But एक clarity होना चाहिए. If I'm asking blockchain technology, एक clarity होना चाहिए that जो आपने 4 लाइन लिखा है, all the 4 lines you have written about blockchain, it's very clear that which clearly defines blockchain technology, the keywords associated with blockchain technology. But I do not again have to put a lot of jargon here in explaining the technology. Okay. Once we define, so what? So what का मतलब यहाँ पे क्या है? So I'm using these 3 layers. First layer is what, second layer is so what, and third layer is now what. So what का मतलब यहाँ पे ये है that Indian context, significance, challenges. Once I know about the technology, now that strategic part which I was talking about. And now what? What type of, once we know the challenges, once we know the significance, then what type of initiatives have been taken by Government of India, right? To overcome those challenges, what is the way forward? Such type of things are expected from you in many of the answers, if not in all of the answer. So, answer generally will have those 3 layers. You do not have to use these words. That should be very clear, right? ये बस मैंने catchy होने के लिए यहाँ पे रख रखा है. But you will remember this what, so what and now what. ठीक है? कभी भी जहाँ पे भी possible हो, देखो हमारा focus है आपके पास कितना knowledge आपके मन में है versus आप क्या लिखते हो. There is a gap there. आप जो एग्जामिनर है वो सिर्फ इसी बात पे चेक करेगा, एग्जामिनर आपको नहीं जानता है पर्सनली, वो सिर्फ यही देखेगा कि पेपर में आपने क्या लिखा है. सो इफ इट इज पॉसिबल, यू ऑलवेज ट्राई टू राइट सम data, and that data should be as recent as possible. Remember, people are aware who are checking the answer, but even their memory has a limitation. So we always will focus upon the most recent data. And if you have again some current affairs hook, which I was talking about, this will, as I mentioned earlier, this will help you a lot in writing very good introduction. So we'll try to do that. And if you do have some important scheme, initiative, at the national level taken by Government of India, if it is a relevant question, I will definitely write that also. Okay. Common traps, science and tech में same thing, over explaining how the tech works, not necessary, इसको करने की जरूरत नहीं है. जो गवर्नेंस पॉलिसी एंगल है, इसको अगर आप मिस करोगे, that will not be good, वो आपका मार्क्स रिड्यूस करेगा. इंडिया स्पेसिफिक एंकर, मान लो अगर आर्टेमिस 2 पे भी क्वेश्चन आ जाए, इस साल देयर इज अ वेरी प्रोबेबल टॉपिक आर्टेमिस 2 पे, एंड क्वेश्चन पूरा आर्टेमिस 2 पे भी हो, बट बिकॉज आई एम राइटिंग हियर फॉर यूपीएससी एग्जामिनेशन, I can talk about Chandrayaan 3, I can talk about future Chandrayaan 4 mission, I can talk about Artemis Accord and the fact that India is a signatory to that, especially if it is a 15 marker question. So I will try to use that India specific anchor in my answer. That will always, if you have space, particularly in 15 marker question, even if it is not a explicit demand of the question, I would still write that. Okay. Significance, challenges, these are two different things. ये तो चलो फिर भी बहुत obvious है. Limitations and challenges are two different things. बहुत बार हम साथ में ले लेते हैं इनको, but limitations and challenges are two different things. You always have to be very clear about it, right? बहुत ही जेनेरिक आंसर नहीं लिखना है. कंक्लूजन जो है साइंस एंड टेक में, जैसे मान लो एक स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन हो वर्सेस एक थोड़ा सा ओपिनियन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन हो, थोड़ा सा एनालिसिस बेस्ड क्वेश्चन हो, वहाँ पे अगर आप एक जेनेरिक कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क लिखोगे बढ़िया नहीं होगा. अगर सिंपल एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है देन ठीक है, एक जेनेरिक कंक्लूजन चल जाएगा. बट इफ इट इज एनालिसिस बेस्ड क्वेश्चन, एग्जामिनेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन, देन जेनेरिक कंक्लूजन दैट विल नॉट अगेन फेच यू एक्स्ट्रा मार्क्स. दैट लास्ट लाइन जो है वो भी एक हुक होना चाहिए. जैसे इंट्रोडक्शन एक हुक होना चाहिए, हमारा कंक्लूजन भी आइडियली कुछ ना कुछ एक हुक होना चाहिए, राइट? सम फ्यूचरिस्टिक कंक्लूजन, सम इंपॉर्टेंट डेटा, सम इंपॉर्टेंट गवर्नमेंट स्कीम which we can mention in the answer. Okay, so this is again very general gyan which I am giving you about science and technology. Let's directly translate that to examples. Again remember, जनरल ज्ञान का कोई फायदा नहीं है जब तक हम स्पेसिफिक एग्जांपल्स को ना देखें. ठीक है, so let's directly translate that to, I have lot of examples from PYQs. I think I have 4 examples, and then I have also given some probable themes of this year mains examination. ठीक है, in the previous session I talked about 4 keywords. I mentioned that whenever you have a topic, whenever you have a question, you immediately decode the topic. You immediately decode the demands of the question, both explicit as well as implicit demand. I say T, topic decode. You immediately design the architecture of your answer. कि question का एक flow है, एक template है. I talked about 9 possible templates जो UPSC पूछती है. Again, वो हमको memorize नहीं करना, वो 9 template memorize नहीं करना. That is only for awareness purpose. But the architecture का यहाँ पे focus ये है that in your mind, the moment you read the question, सब हेडिंग्स आपके क्लियर हैं कि हमारा आंसर का मेन सब हेडिंग क्या होगा. ठीक है, इतना आपने कर लिया. आंसर में विल ट्राई टू, एज आई सेड, दैट आई विल ट्राई टू ऐड मोर एंड मोर डायमेंशंस. आई मेंशन्ड इन द प्रीवियस सेशन दैट पेस्टल प्लस, दैट पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक, सोशल, टेक्नोलॉजिकल, लीगल, environmental, but I can also add plus का मतलब यहाँ पे ये है, if there is a historical dimension I will add that, if there is an international dimension I will add that, if there is an ethical dimension I will add that. So I talked about 9 possible dimensions, and I do not have to use this specific keyword all the time. जैसे even within legal there can be further sub dimensions. Within legal I can have a constitutional dimension, I can have some policy dimension, right? So I will add dimensions, and जो फाइनल आपका जो 1 मार्क्स 0.5 मार्क्स जो आंसर एक्स्ट्रा आएगा वो आएगा आर्टिकुलेशन से. Students fell short in these two things, particularly they fell short in that last part. Now what is articulation? Articulation means that whatever you are writing, do we have specific data point to justify what you have written? Do we have specific schemes to again that extra जो भी चाहिए एक edge जो है आपको marks में वो कैसे आएगा, ठीक है? So let's look at this question. So I call this framework TADA, TADA framework. Topic, decode, architecture, dimension and articulation. And I want all of you to specifically ये जो articulation part है और जो dimensions part है, I always would want all of you to emphasize upon this two part while you are writing answer. Like deliberately, in the initial phases of your answer writing, you can take your time, but deliberately think about that is your answer covering different dimensions? Does it have enough articulation to justify whatever we have written? Okay, so take your time, but think about this. So let's start with this question, for example. This was a question just last year. ये last year का question है. The fusion energy program in India has steadily evolved over past few decades. Mention India's contribution to ITER. What will be the implications of the success of this project for the future of global energy? ठीक है, ये हमारा क्वेश्चन है. फ्यूजन को आपने वेगली डिफाइन किया. यू डू नॉट हैव एग्जैक्ट क्लैरिटी ओवर फ्यूजन. मैंने बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स को देखा है, याद नहीं है. हाई टेम्परेचर याद था, किसी ने 1 लाख लिखा है, किसी ने 1 मिलियन लिखा है, बट यू डू नॉट नो द एग्जैक्ट डेटा पॉइंट. आप जेनेरिक कंट्रीब्यूशन लिख रहे हो कि इंडिया ने पैसे दे दिए हैं, साइंटिस्ट हैं, बट इफ यू डू नॉट नो दैट specific contribution which India is making apart from those generic points, what exactly is India doing, right? आपने clean energy mention कर दिया but आपने justify नहीं किया कि इसका मतलब क्या है. Why are we saying that it is clean energy? Why fusion is such a big deal? You did not justify that. Few things. Question में edge कैसे आएगा, हमारा stand out कैसे होगा हमारा आंसर. पहला तो ये होगा कि जो स्पेसिफिक कंट्रीब्यूशन जब हम लिखेंगे वो एक स्टैंडिंग आउट पॉइंट होगा, ठीक है. एंड सेकेंड पॉइंट जो है वो ग्लोबल एनर्जी इम्प्लीकेशंस जो है इसको आप रिलेट करोगे इन्वायरमेंटल डायमेंशन से. बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है दैट इन्वायरमेंटल डायमेंशन ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम. ITR का जो आर्किटेक्चर है, बिकॉज दिस क्वेश्चन इज स्पेसिफिक टू ITR. सो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली ITR इज, आप खाली ये लिख दोगे कि ITR इज डूइंग न्यूक्लियर फ्यूजन, बट हाउ इज इट इज ट्राइंग टू डू दैट. सम एक्सपेक्टेशन इज देयर. Again, I do not have to define magnetic fusion, but I have to talk about that ITR is trying to do plasma confinement within a tokamak. तो ये कुछ तो हमको लिखना पड़ेगा. I do not have to define tokamak. I do not have to make any diagram, right? And India का जो role है वो खाली participatory नहीं है, strategic है. India is one of the equal 9 partners in this particular project. There are many countries, but there are 9 most important nations, and India is one of those important nations. तो आप ये mention करोगे आंसर में. Let's use that framework which I talked about in the previous session. Specific, discuss, which is implication. Core क्या है? India का contribution in ITR and overall fusion energy future. India's strategic science diplomacy, that is the scope. And implicit क्या है? That India is not just a technology partner, is a technology partner, not just a beneficiary. Okay, this is important. Template, evolution, status, future. Subheading, पहला subheading मेरा क्या है? Fusion energy basics. I immediately start with fusion energy basics. Second subheading, I talk about ITR, what it is, right? I briefly mention about ITR. Third subheading, what is India's specific contribution? And fourth subheading, implications. अगर सब हेडिंग भी अगर आपके दिमाग में क्लियर है ना आंसर का, दैट विल ऑल्सो गिव यू दैट, आप आंसर अच्छा लिख पाओगे. अब उसमें जो फाइनल एक मार्क्स एक्स्ट्रा चाहिए, दैट विल इंक्लूड व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट आर्टिकुलेशन, व्हेन यू ऐड डिफरेंट डायमेंशंस. ठीक है, तो डायमेंशन क्या होगा? देयर विल बी अ टेक्नोलॉजिकल डायमेंशन. पेस्टल का जो टी है, देयर विल बी अ टेक्नोलॉजिकल डायमेंशन. तो व्हेन आई एम एक्सप्लेनिंग ITR project, I will talk about plasma confinement at So we have to confine deuterium, tritium plasma at about 100 million degrees Celsius or even more than that. Right? So I will have to mention that. The ITR is trying to attain that. We have to breed tritium from lithium. Deuterium तो बहुत सारा available है ocean में, but tritium is not available. So I have to breed tritium from lithium. I will mention that. When I talk about India's contribution, apart from writing that articulation, I'm going to mention that. But I will mention that India is a 7-nation equal partner. So not 9, 7-nation equal partner. When I talk about ITR itself, I will add that economic dimension. 20 billion का project है, $20 billion का project है. The most expensive fusion project. If you remember that it is located in France, that will again give you that extra edge, that it is located in southern France. Many nations. India's contribution, and then of course the international dimension which I mentioned that you'll have to write. This is a collaboration among many countries. India is one of those nations. What will be the articulation point? ये जो economic वाला part है, ये articulation हो गया हमारा. I added that. Data. India का specific contribution क्या है? That largest vacuum chamber जो cryostat cooling है, because this entire device will operate at millions of degrees Celsius. And the cooling requirement है, that is being provided by India. So apart from the generic point which you will write that a lot of Indian scientists are working there, or India is contributing financially to this project, ये general points हैं. But वो जो specific point है cooling requirement वाला, the largest cryostat vacuum. That word cryostat is very important here. This will fetch you that extra marks, because ये question directly हिंदू के एक explained page से आया था, हिंदू में covered था, और वहाँ पे clearly mentioned था that India is contributing to that cryostat cooling. तो examiner जो देखेगा वो, that have you written that keyword or not, ठीक है? Implications, आप explain करोगे why fusion is a big deal. And look, question ये भी है that fusion program has evolved over fast few. अब ये question का part नहीं है, but आप इसको भी justify कर सकते हो. आप लिखोगे that apart from the fact that India is part of ITR, there is a body called Institute of Plasma Research, which operates under Department of Atomic Energy, and this body is building its own tokamak called Aditya, another tokamak called SST, Steady State Superconducting Tokamak. So you'll mention that apart from the fact that India is party to ITR, we also are building our own tokamak. So if you write all of this, that will now fetch you that 7 marks, which can be done by the way. But I do think that 7 marks can occur in 10 marker question, but it will require this entire analysis. It may initially feel like ये too much है, but फिर हम practice इसीलिए करते हैं. जो पूरा पर्पस ऑफ प्रैक्टिस, जैसे आप मेंस देख के कोई भी एग्जामिन, कोई भी कैंडिडेट से आके बात करना कैसा हुआ, सब बोलेंगे ठीक हुआ, कोई नहीं बोलेगा खराब हुआ, सबका ठीक होता है मेंस. आंसर सब लोग लिख के आ जाते हैं, बट फिर मार्क्स आप देखोगे आपको डिफरेंस दिख जाएगा. आप उनका आंसर क्वालिटी फिर चेक करोगे, उन्होंने पिछले आंसर्स देखे तो उसमें भी डिफरेंस दिख जाएगा आपको. दिस इज वेयर दैट प्रैक्टिस एंड दैट डेलिबरेट फोकस, दैट एम आई एडिंग सम डेटा पॉइंट, एम आई एडिंग सम आर्टिकुलेशन, right, the deliberate focus is very required. ठीक है? If you have any doubt here in what I have discussed here, you can ask questions. हाँ, माइक से पूछ लो, ज़्यादा बढ़िया रहेगा. होगा यहाँ पे म्यूट अनम्यूट करो. हाँ.
What you have mentioned in like decode architecture and dimensions articulations, is it not necessary to write full lines just writing the keywords and then what it?
Lot of feedback. ठीक है, ऐसे ही पूछ लीजिए. Okay, that's a good question. The question, Snehil, right? So Snehil is asking is that only keywords without lot of explanation, because that will exceed word limit. That is what you are asking. Okay, this is lot of information which I have provided here is based on the framework. आप इस सारे information को आंसर लिख के, जिस तरीके से लिख रहा है 150 में हो जाएगा. there are certain questions जहाँ पे only writing keyword, जैसे in the same year, not in the same year, in 2024 there was a 10 marker question which had 4 parts. That what is the current technology we are using in toll collection? What are the advantages and limitations of that technology? What is National Ministry of National Highways planning? And do you think some problem with that plan? 4 parts. There I do not need like a lot of those explanation about how RFID, in any answer, in any question I do not need to explain how RFID functions. And even if I just justify those 4 demands, that is enough. ये आंसर नहीं है, ये जो मैंने लिखा है यहाँ पे आंसर नहीं है, ये फ्रेमवर्क है. आप इस फ्रेमवर्क को यूज करके आंसर लिख के देखना, 150 वर्ड्स में हो जाएगा. आप ये 4 सब हेडिंग देना. रिमेंबर, मेन आंसर आपका बस यहीं पे खत्म हो गया. द मोमेंट यू गिव दिस 4 सब हेडिंग, आपका आंसर यहीं पे कंप्लीट है. इस 4 सब हेडिंग के क्वालिटी को कैसे इंप्रूव करना है, उसके लिए 2 चीजें हैं. दैट यू कवर दोज डिफरेंट डायमेंशंस एंड यू ऐड दैट आर्टिकुलेशन. आंसर हमारा ये है दैट यू गिव दिस 4 सब हेडिंग्स. How to improve the quality, that is that part. So do that and you'll realize that no, it can be completed into 150 words. So whatever question I am giving here, like one of the things, those who are watching, those who will watch, and you guys, one of the thing you can do here is that write the answer. आप again ये खाली आप session attend करो और आप इसको implement नहीं करो, कोई फायदा नहीं है. I have a huge bias towards action. कि जब तक हम, एक बहुत famous quote है इंग्लिश में, that बेस्ट इज द एनिमी ऑफ गुड. होता यह है कि हम ऑलवेज आर स्ट्राइविंग फॉर बेस्ट, कि ये हो जाएगा फिर आंसर लिखेंगे, राइट. एंड अगेन स्टार्ट डूइंग इट, यू लर्न. द मोर यू प्रैक्टिस, यू विल इम्प्रूव फर्दर, यू विल रियलाइज सम लिमिटेशन, सम प्रॉब्लम्स यू आर फेसिंग, some issues which are occurring, and you automatically will realize that in the course of time you are improving. So have that bias towards action. Do not wait for the right opportunity to write answer. So every question which I am discussing here, I have given you the framework. Implement this framework and write the answer, right? Mail it to me. Send your answer. Like, have you used this framework and complete the answer into stipulated word limit. Biotech question. ये भी लास्ट ईयर का क्वेश्चन है शायद, आई थिंक. हाउ कैन इंडिया अचीव एनर्जी इंडिपेंडेंस थ्रू क्लीन टेक्नोलॉजी? ओके. By 2047, how can biotechnology play a crucial role in this endeavor? You write generic points about solar, wind, hydro, but you do not, एक क्वेश्चन का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एंकर ये है that how can biotechnology help, and by the way also that some of the problems which solar or wind might have, but maybe biotechnology will not have that same problem. And how do we highlight that? I should try to highlight that also. Okay. You do not write about those keywords like algal biofuel or microbial fuel cell or production of hydrogen with help of biological methods. You do not mention those points at all. You do not talk about जो पूरा हमारा क्वेश्चन जो 2047 है वो रैंडम नहीं है. You do not talk about that entire विकसित भारत कैंपेन जो चल रहा है, that 100 years of independence, and you are linking that there are certain targets we aim to implement by 2047, 100 years after independence. And you do not connect this goal of energy security with that Viksit Bharat energy target, right? So those things, you do not talk about important government scheme, जैसे यहाँ पे national bioenergy program, ethanol blending program, ये सारी चीजें अगर आप नहीं लिखोगे, again आपके marks कटेंगे यहाँ पे. Clean technology broad है. You write a generic answer about renewable energy. You do not actually mention about what does it even mean to have clean technology, and you do not specifically focus upon that biotech part, you will not get good marks, right? So if the second part of your answer is like first part, that a generic discussion of biotech, then you will not get good marks. First part you will write about other different type of energy sources, but in the second part you have to be more specific and you have to talk about that how biotechnology stands out compared to, let's say, solar or wind energy when we talk about our energy security demands. So let's see how this will fit into our framework. Again answer completes here. ये और ये सिर्फ इम्प्रूवमेंट है, उस पार्ट को हम कैसे इंक्लूड करेंगे. Explain 2 लिंक्ड डिमांड्स हैं, 2 डिमांड है यहाँ पे, दोनों डिमांड को हमको फुलफिल करना है. क्लीन टेक एनर्जी इंडिपेंडेंस, बायोटेक स्पेसिफिक रोल, 2 डिमांड्स है क्वेश्चन के. स्कोप क्या है? विकसित भारत एनर्जी गोल जो 2047 हमारा विकसित भारत टारगेट है. इम्प्लिसिट डिमांड क्या है? बायोटेक एज कॉम्प्लीमेंट टू रिन्यूएबल्स नॉट रिप्लेसमेंट. दिस इज ऑल्सो वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सब हेडिंग्स, इमीडिएटली लुक एट द सब हेडिंग. इंडियाज 2047 एनर्जी इंडिपेंडेंस टारगेट्स. आप डायरेक्टली इसको रिलेट करोगे हमारी एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी से. अभी अगर मुझे आंसर लिखना हो तो मैं 2-3 एग्जांपल भी दे दूंगा. स्टेट ऑफ हॉर्मुज क्राइसिस, फ्यूल प्राइस, वो भी उस टाइम तो नहीं, ये लास्ट ईयर का क्वेश्चन है, बट अभी अगर मुझे सेम आंसर लिखना हो, आई विल ऐड दैट करंट अफेयर्स हुक पार्ट in justifying that part. Clean tech landscape, I will talk about different type of clean tech, what does it mean, I will give the example, and then I will talk about where does biotech fit, and I will talk about biotech contribution. ठीक है? When I am writing about that biotech fits, I will focus upon algal biofuel, the 3rd generation biofuel. I will focus upon ethanol, not from food crop, but ethanol from cellulose, which we are recovering from non-food biomass. I will talk about CNG, but not from that fossil fuel, CNG which we are recovering from biomass. Remember methane है, चाहे हम organic matter से करें या हम fossil fuels की तरह use करें. I will talk about the economic role. Immediately will talk about how much money we are spending on fossil fuel import and how we become vulnerable as a, and ये इसका जो इसके इमीडिएट बाद ये पॉइंट आना चाहिए दैट इकोनॉमिक के बाद जो हमारा स्ट्रैटेजिक रिक्वायरमेंट है दैट वी टॉक अबाउट एनर्जी इंडिपेंडेंस. आई इमीडिएटली कनेक्ट दिस पॉइंट टू दिस पॉइंट. इन्वायरमेंटल या तो पहले आएगा या तो बाद में आएगा. आई थिंक यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा आई विल चेंज दैट ऑर्डरिंग. साइंटिफिक इन्वायरमेंटल एट वन लोकेशन, एट वन प्लेस, इकोनॉमिक स्ट्रैटेजिक एट वन प्लेस. And when I talk about that way forward, I will talk about National Bioenergy Program. I will talk about that ethanol blending mandate. ये dimensions हैं. Data क्या है? That economic data which I mentioned, that becomes one of my articulation point. How much money we are spending on fuel import. Data क्या है? When I talk about our environmental goal, I connect that with our Panchamrit target. That by 2030, we want to achieve 500 gigawatt of fossil fuel, non-fossil fuel energy. Scheme क्या है? I talk about National Bioenergy Program. Milestone we have already achieved. That जो हमारा ethanol blending target था इस last financial year का, we have completed that target. ये milestone है हमारा. तो we improve the subheading with dimensions and we improve those dimensions with this articulation. ठीक है? And I do that and I fetch that extra marks rather than writing a generic answer. So this is the second example I can give you. Would you like guys to write answer this question here? If I give you some time, like 5-6 minutes, एक practice करके देख लेते हैं. Question ये है. Those who are watching it live, I will give you 7 minutes exactly. You can write answer to this question. आपके पास framework है. How do I put that framework? How do I translate that on a piece of paper? Question है यहाँ पे. This is the question. Framework is also here. I just want to write the answer. कॉफी लेते आना. कॉफी बोल देना नहीं. Just one more thing. आपको लगता है कि कुछ और आप सब हेडिंग यूज कर सकते हो, यूज करो. फ्रेमवर्क रिजिड, कोई भी फ्रेमवर्क रिजिड नहीं है. ये हमेशा हमको याद रखना है. एवरी फ्रेमवर्क हैज टू बी फ्लेक्सिबल फ्रेमवर्क. More or less, this is a framework. What suits you, that is up to you. Those who will watch this video later, pause the video or keep the video running, but write the answer. That will be perhaps best utilization of this session, that you practice also. Done? Give you one more minute. Way forward should ideally be a concluding remark. No, not just one statement. Yeah, so if it is 150 words, like 2-3 lines are more than enough. They say, I will definitely highlight on few things how I will further improve the quality of this answer. I have mentioned there, there is an environmental dimension which I can cover, which will be about carbon negative potential of bioenergy. Carbon negative potential का मतलब क्या होता है? That I use biofuel, but that carbon dioxide I do not let it get emitted in the atmosphere. I store it using carbon capture, utilization, storage technology. So biofuel burning does not add new CO2, but I am not even getting that CO2 released into atmosphere. I am capturing it, and that is called negative emission. It is only possible in case of bioenergy. I don't know if I mentioned it here. I think I should have mentioned it here about that baseload capacity. That solar and wind जो है वो baseload capacity को fulfill नहीं कर पाएंगे, but जो biofuel है वो हमारा baseload requirement को fulfill कर पाएगा. So that is something which we can write, that how biotechnology can play a very crucial role in this particular endeavor. Okay, ठीक है. Anyways, let's go to the next question. This is a topic which is very, very important, and expect questions for many years now on AI, overall this concept of AI. Introduce the concept of artificial intelligence. How does AI help in clinical diagnosis? Do you perceive any threat to privacy of the individual in the use of AI in healthcare? 3 parts, 10 marker question, 150 words. Too much detailing of definition of AI, not required here. Okay? You list applications, but you do not provide clinical specific examples where we are already using AI in healthcare. Again, that will reduce the marks. Privacy concern, you mentioned data can be stolen, one generic line. You do not actually justify, you do not connect to that. Your knowledge of polity, where right to privacy, Putta Swami judgment, you do not connect to all of those things. You do not talk about that how there is a legal mechanism in India, right? Pura jo Digital Data Protection Act hai, you do not connect to that. Okay. You do not talk at all about that very serious risk about algorithmic bias, that how AI can have biases depending upon its training data, right? So this is where you write again a very generic answer. What is AI? How does it help in clinical diagnosis? तो एक generic answer वो सब लोग लिख के लेके आएंगे. And this is what I meant when I say that कोई भी नहीं बोलेगा हमारा exam खराब हुआ है. But when the moment you add those specific examples, the articulation, different dimensions, your knowledge from other topics, the moment you start applying that, you'll realize that your answer is now like emerging as a beautiful answer. So same cheese. Introduce, explain, assess, 3-part. AI in healthcare, privacy risk, clinical diagnosis context, privacy as a right. Not just as a data security issue, but privacy as a rights issue. This is very important. I will not simply write this as a data security issue. Subheading, brief intro. Remember 150 words में लिखना है. Maximum बहुत ज़्यादा detailing की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है. Very brief introduction. Clinical applications, but I will write example. I will show you the examples. Privacy threats, India's regulatory response. ये हमारा subheading है. अब इस subheading में dimensions क्या क्या आएंगे? The moment I talk about clinical application, I will add use of machine learning neural networks in image recognition, radiology, pathology, right? जो health record mining है, जो हमारा electronic health record हम maintain करके रह रहे हैं, वहाँ से कुछ data insight लेके आना. When I talk about privacy threat, I talk about algorithmic bias. I talk about consent. Consent is a very, again, remember it is not about only data theft. Do people know that their data is being used for training purposes? This raises an ethical issue, a legal issue, a constitutional issue. The problem of explainability. What if AI makes a mistake? AI is doing something, AI is giving you some diagnosis, and you do not even know that how does AI come to that conclusion. Neural networks एक problem है, that is called black box problem. That when they sometimes, and not sometimes, when they make a prediction, you actually do not know the exact mechanism. Based on that, they have made a particular prediction. There is an explainability problem. You do not talk about, again, when we talk about privacy threat, that Digital Data Protection Act. You do not connect that to, so the moment you connect that to Article 21, informational privacy, Putta Swami judgment of Supreme Court, where privacy is a fundamental right, now your answer becomes a beautiful answer, where you are using knowledge from other topic, from polity, in this case, science and technology. How do I articulation? When I write about applications, AI radiology tool, 94% accuracy in TB detection, WHO का report है. Google has released tools which can read retinal scan, AI tools which can read retinal scan to know about if you have the chances of heart stroke or not. Right? Things like that. These are specific examples which I can talk about. AI का जो human eye versus AI analyzing an image, these are two different capabilities. The moment I use specific example, my answer becomes better. When I talk about algorithmic bias, AI misdiagnosing disease in darker skin tones. This is not theoretical. This already has happened. There are examples because training data mostly involve training data of Europeans or white Americans, and for darker tone, it can misdiagnose diseases, right? When we talk about again that privacy problem, articulation क्या होगा हमारा? Case Putta Swami versus Union of India judgment, where privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21. हम इंडिया के स्कीम से कनेक्ट करेंगे, दैट हम आयुष्मान डिजिटल मिशन की बात करते हैं, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक हेल्थ रिकॉर्ड की बात करते हैं, बट यहाँ पे AI बहुत अमेजिंग टूल हो सकता है. हाउएवर इट हैज टू फुलफिल दिस ऑब्लिगेशन, दैट डेटा फिड्यूशियरी ऑब्लिगेशन अंडर डिजिटल प्रोटेक्शन डेटा एक्ट. ये हमारा कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क होगा, दैट AI कैन बी अ ग्रेट टूल इन हेल्थ केयर, बट जो भी हमने प्रॉब्लम्स अभी बात की, उन प्रॉब्लम्स को रेक्टिफाई करने का भी तरीका है. We have a legal basis. We just have to implement it properly. So when we talk about Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, when we talk about Health ID, that Abha ID आपने पढ़ा होगा, when we talk about that electronic health record maintaining, and यहाँ पे whoever agency is handling that data, उनका एक fiduciary responsibility है, that for what purpose, how they are using that data, and that fiduciary responsibility has a legal basis, that is जो हमारा डिजिटल प्रोटेक्शन डेटा एक्ट जो है 2023 वो हमको मेंशन करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. सो वंस यू हैव दैट सब हेडिंग, यू ऐड डायमेंशंस, एंड विद इन दोज डायमेंशंस यू गिव दैट आर्टिकुलेशन, इट बिकम्स अ गुड आंसर. ठीक है. इनिशियल डेज में देखो ये करने में टाइम लगेगा. मैं हमेशा बोलूंगा इनिशियल डेज में, लास्ट सेशन में भी मैंने यही बताया था कि जब आप इनिशियल डेज में करोगे, टेक योर टाइम. टेक फॉर एग्जाम्पल 12-13 minutes for 10 marker question, take 20 minutes for 15 marker question. But gradually देखो क्या होगा, gradually इस पूरे प्रोसेस में, ये पूरा का पूरा प्रोसेस आपको 1-1.5 minutes में कंप्लीट करना है. That your subheadings are very clear, your dimensions are clear, your examples are clear. And उसके बाद जो है बाकी का टाइम आप लिखने में लगा रहे हो, तो बट 1 minute सोचने में लगाना चाहिए. 1 minute हमारा एक दिमाग में होना चाहिए, that how do I have a proper structure. साइंस टेक आप देखो कैसे पढ़ोगे, 2 लेवल पे पढ़ोगे आप. पहला लेवल कि जो भी कीवर्ड्स हैं उन सबको कीवर्ड्स का एक बेसिक प्रिपरेशन करोगे, एंड दूसरा लेवल ये है दैट उन कीवर्ड्स से रिलेटेड जो करंट अफेयर्स के टॉपिक्स हैं उसको डिटेल में और जाओगे. जो फर्स्ट लेवल प्रिपरेशन है दैट विल बी दैट वो कुछ पॉइंट्स ऐसे होंगे जो आप कहीं पे भी थ्रो कर सकते हो, बट जो सेकेंड लेवल प्रिपरेशन है वेयर यू गो इनटू डिटेल्स ऑफ दैट, जैसे जो फ्यूजन वाला टॉपिक था, व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट दैट क्रायोस्टैट कूलिंग, जो AI इन हेल्थ केयर वाला जो है, व्हेन यू राइट दोज स्पेसिफिक एग्जाम्पल, दैट विल फेच यू दैट एक्स्ट्रा मार्क्स. ठीक है. वन लास्ट क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम PYQ. ये भी लास्ट ईयर का क्वेश्चन है, 15 मार्कर क्वेश्चन. दिस इज अ 15 मार्कर क्वेश्चन. हाउ डज nanotechnology offers significant advancements in the field of agriculture. How can this technology help to uplift the socio-economic status of farmer? अगर आपने ये खाली लिखा कि देखो increase income, reduces cost, mechanism आपने बताया नहीं, significant advancement, तो बताना पड़ेगा हमको यहाँ पे, इस केस में आपको बताना पड़ेगा कि नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी में ऐसा क्या है जो existing technology है उससे हम नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. How does nanotechnology help in advancement in farming? So if you have again those very generic points, आपने बात nano fertilizer की बात कर दी, but you actually do not mention that how is nano fertilizer better than जो traditional fertilizer हम use कर रहे हैं. 15 marker question है, question का important part भी है, significant advancement. If you do not do that, again आपको वही generic marks मिलेंगे. If you want that extra marks, you have to write down specific points. So this is where I have mentioned it here, that you fail to show mechanism, how nano fertilizers reduce input cost, how nano sensors reduce crop loss. ये specific चीजें जब तक आप नहीं लिखोगे, again आपको marks नहीं मिलेगा. Same thing, decode the topic. What nanotechnology enables in agriculture? Specific applications with mechanism, because significant advancement जो word है, तो यहाँ पे mechanism देना ज़रूरी है. Welfare impact, I immediately write about input cost, yield market, and इस आंसर अगर इसमें आपने nano urea by if को नहीं mention किया, you also do not mention about that Indian farmer and fertilizer cooperative, आपके marks कटेंगे. पूरे question का कारण यही है that IFFCO, which is a cooperative in India, has now 2 nano fertilizers approved by Government of India. साइंटिफिक आप बात करोगे, सबसे पहला तो अचीवमेंट यही है दैट यूरिया का, नाइट्रोजन का नैनो इनकैप्सुलेशन, दैट we have now 30-40 nanometer of nitrogen. You talk about that how nanoparticles have very large surface area, because of that they are much more chemically reactive and plants need very small amount then, and they can fulfill their nitrogen requirement. You also add that how this leads to targeted delivery. I do not have to use this on soil, I just have to spray on the leaves of the crop. I mentioned that, right? And crops can directly absorb, plants can directly absorb that through their stomata. Okay. I talk about input cost reduction, fertilizer subsidy burden. Fertilizer subsidy, farmers के पास fertilizers का cost कम है because government is subsidizing that. अब यहाँ पे हम economics का knowledge यहाँ पे use कर रहे हैं. बिना fertilizer subsidy के nano यूरिया का जो cost है वो कम है, ठीक है? I talk about environmental benefits also. It is not only the agricultural benefit. Excessive use of fertilizer, that causes soil degradation, that reduces fertility, that causes water pollution. Fertilizer industry has very high carbon footprint. Nano reduces all of that. It reduces carbon footprint, it improves urea efficiency, it reduces that land degradation problem. And then I talk about, of course, that policy, nano urea, scale up जो government का पूरा एक focus है. At the same time, my answer should not only talk about nano fertilizers. It should also talk about the same scientific logic can be applied for nano pesticides. We do not have any approved in India. But question is not asking only about fertilizer. Question is saying in agriculture. So I talk about nano pesticides also. I talk about small sensors placed in the field which all the time are telling me about parameters of soil. And based on that हमारा जो intervention है, that कौन से crop को कौन सा input चाहिए, rather than using same input throughout the field, हमारा जो input intervention है वो specific है depending upon crop requirement. ये हम better कर सकते हैं. That will reduce the input cost of, that will reduce loss, that will reduce input cost. But at the same time, it will increase that cost of nano sensor. Nano sensor का अपना खुद का एक cost तो नहीं है. So when I write that scientific application, I mention that how that 500 milliliter of nano urea replaces that for about 55 kg of bag. How this reduces cost. How nano sensors help us in understanding about soil parameters. And of course, I talk about nano fertilizer and nano mission, although this nano mission as of now, this lapsed in 2021. But because of that focus on nanotechnology, you have cooperatives like IFFCO and you have so many people who are doing their master's program in nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is an emerging field in India. So even though nano mission is not occurring, like it's not a contemporary mission, it is not an ongoing mission, but still I think we can talk about as a concluding remark in this particular question. So these are the 4 examples I had to show from science and technology, that how can we improve the quality of the answer in science and tech question. I have few current affairs example also. I'm not going to discuss this into detail. I'm simply going to tell you the theme. What I expect you to do as an aspirant, as a candidate, that you prepare this theme, because all of these are very probable themes. You prepare this theme using that framework, and if you have any type of question, again, question can be asked in a number of ways from these themes, then how, depending upon that requirement of the question, you can write a good answer. So the first theme here is Kalpakam reactor, which has become critical now, a fast breeder reactor which has become critical. तो इसके कारण बहुत तरीके से क्वेश्चन पूछा जा सकता है. एक तो सबसे सिंपल क्वेश्चन यही है कि डॉक्टर भाभा का कंट्रीब्यूशन बता दो आप, बिकॉज एक टॉपिक में है भी ना कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ इंडियंस इन साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी. तो एक क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी इस साल यही पूछ सकती है, दैट व्हाट आर द कंट्रीब्यूशंस ऑफ डॉक्टर होमी जहांगीर भाभा इन न्यूक्लियर फिजिक्स एंड ओवरऑल इन न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी प्रोग्राम ऑफ इंडिया. देयर कैन बी क्वेश्चन अबाउट कि ये जो पूरा कल्पकम रिएक्टर है उसका सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है, challenges क्या हैं, वे फॉरवर्ड क्या है, that can be a question. There can be a question about that explain overall that 3-stage nuclear energy program, and in that 3-stage program discuss the significance of Kalpakam becoming critical. So this topic can be asked in a number of ways. So how do I prepare this topic across different dimensions? And remember, I have only included very few dimensions. I would expect you to add more dimension when you prepare this particular topic. स्ट्रैटेजिक डायमेंशन ये है, 25% थोरियम रिजर्व दुनिया में भारत में है. इकोनॉमिक डायमेंशन क्या है, so much of import of energy from other countries, and baseload requirement. Baseload requirement cannot be fulfilled by solar energy. That requires a reliable source of energy, and nuclear can be that reliable source of energy. Environmental dimension क्या है, zero emission baseload. That even for baseload requirement, zero emission, no carbon dioxide emission from nuclear energy. Geopolitical क्या है, ठीक है, India is not a member of nuclear supplier group, but we do have civil nuclear deals with many countries. Tech क्या है यहाँ पे, technological dimension क्या है, जो fast breeder reactor है that breeds more fuel than it consumes. इसका पूरा का पूरा significance यही है that it uses liquid sodium as a coolant and it breeds more fuel than it consumes. एंड आर्टिकुलेशन मेरा क्या होगा, ये जो पहला पॉइंट यही है, 25% थोरियम रिजर्व, कल्पकम हैज बिकम क्रिटिकल इन अप्रैल 2025. अगर इस क्वेश्चन इस साल का हो तो मैं ये मंथ भी लिखूंगा मैं, इन अप्रैल 2025 कल्पकम बिकेम क्रिटिकल. आई विल कनेक्ट दैट टू ओवरऑल आवर 3-staged न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी प्रोग्राम. आई विल टॉक अबाउट दैट न्यूक्लियर energy mission which was announced in last year budget 2024-25 with focus of 100 gigawatt of nuclear capacity by 2047. I will definitely add this data that despite so much of capacity, how much electricity production, 3% from nuclear, versus compare that with France, 70% of electricity is coming from nuclear power plant. तो ये सारी चीजें, ये कुछ ready-made data points I have mentioned it here to improve the articulation part. But add more things here. Why to limit yourself only to what I am showing here? Add more articulation point. Add more dimensions here. And ये जो sub heading है, that will change depending upon what type of question has been asked by UPSC. So this is one topic. Do you have anything to ask here in this topic? The second topic, that is, अब ये I was expecting this question in mains, but prelims में आ गया, तो I don't think कि अब mains में अभी आएगा ये. But you never know that जो Nexcar 19 and Birsa 101, 2 things, Nexcar 19 and Birsa 101, both of them within 1 year have been approved in by Government of India. A remarkable feat in gene therapy and use of CRISPR-Cas9 in solving, in like taking care of genetic diseases. तो पूरा जो जीन थेरेपी, जीन एडिटिंग ये है क्या, दोनों डिफरेंट कैसे हैं, दोनों सेम कैसे हैं, दोनों डिफरेंट कैसे हैं, ये भी एक फोकस. साइंटिफिक डायमेंशन आप ऐड करोगे, इथिकल डायमेंशन आप ऐड करोगे. इस पूरे टॉपिक को जब आप प्रिपेयर करोगे जीन एडिटिंग का, तो जो इथिकल डायमेंशन है, जर्म लाइन जीन एडिटिंग, जो पूरा कंसेंट वाला प्रॉब्लम है, जो डिज़ाइनर बेबी वाला प्रॉब्लम है, ये सारी चीज़ें आप ऐड करोगे. आप इकोनॉमिक डायमेंशन ऐड करोगे, दैट गैप बिटवीन हैव्स एंड हैव नॉट्स. सिकल सेल एनीमिया का जो बिरसा 101 है, उसका अभी भी कॉस्ट 30 से 40 लाख रुपए है. हु आर वल्नरेबल टू सिकल सेल एनीमिया? पीपल फ्रॉम ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स. 30-40 लाख रुपए आप सोच रहे हो. तो ये वाला जो इकोनॉमिक डायमेंशन आप ऐड करोगे. आप इंटरनेशनल डायमेंशन ऐड करोगे कि WHO के गाइडलाइंस क्या हैं पूरे के पूरे ओवरऑल ऑन जीन थेरेपी इन सॉल्विंग जेनेटिक डिजीजेस, राइट. बट इस अब ये तो चलो डिजीज की बात है. व्हाट इफ दे आस्क अ क्वेश्चन ऑन GM क्रॉप, तो अलग तरीके से उसको आप हैंडल करोगे. सो आई एम सिंपली गिविंग यू अ फ्रेमवर्क, बट this topic can be asked in again so many different ways. If there is a question on agriculture, GM crop in agriculture, and how do you handle that, that will be different from what I have shown here. तो वहाँ पे again हमारा जो articulation है and जो data है, जो schemes हैं, वो थोड़े बहुत आपके differ करेंगे. And one more topic from current affairs, that is Artemis program, that I will look into the details of Artemis 2 particularly, and एक साइंस एंड टेक एंड एक IR का जो एक सॉर्ट ऑफ कन्वर्जेंस है यहाँ पे, वो है दैट इंडिया बिकमिंग अ मेंबर ऑफ आर्टेमिस अकॉर्ड. तो आर्टेमिस अकॉर्ड क्या है, एंड द फैक्ट दैट इंडिया इज अ सिग्नेटरी टू आर्टेमिस अकॉर्ड, उसका सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है एंड उसके चैलेंजेस खुद में क्या है. सो दिस इज अनदर टॉपिक विच आई विल प्रिपेयर. आर्टेमिस प्रोग्राम, इंडिया स्पेस डिप्लोमेसी, एंड ओवरऑल this entire topic of outer space governance, that in itself becomes a very important topic for this year mains examination, right. तो ये space में अगर मुझे कुछ prepare करना हो, I will prepare this topic into detail. So this was about science and tech. Sorry, one more theme I have mentioned, defense indigenization. Again I was prelims में इस पे question आ भी गया, but mains में भी फिर भी आ सकता है. This entire theme of defense indigenization, यहाँ पे देखो सब लोग कुछ ना कुछ लिख के आएंगे. यहां पे जो आप डेटा पॉइंट लिखोगे कि हमारा डिफेंस एक्सपोर्ट क्या था रिसेंट का वर्सेस आज से 5 साल पहले क्या था, जब आप स्पेसिफिक पॉलिसी बात करोगे आईडेक्स की, जब आप डिफेंस प्रोक्योरमेंट पॉलिसी की बात करोगे, डिफेंस एक्विजिशन पॉलिसी 2020 की बात करोगे, तब आपके एक्स्ट्रा मार्क्स आएंगे. इंडिजिनाइजेशन क्यों है, कम पैसे हम लगा रहे हैं, प्राइवेट सेक्टर नहीं है, वो सब ठीक है, सब लोग लिख के आएंगे. बट द मोमेंट आई एड दैट स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट, जैसे I totally see UPSC asking a question कि lot of progress has occurred in defense export. तो वहाँ पे आप लिखोगे that how specific private companies जो हैं they are doing some really remarkable work. How we are selling BrahMos to Philippines, we are supplying things to Cyprus, or we are supplying things to Armenia. तो ये सारी चीजें हम लिखेंगे. So the more specific we are in the answer, the more marks we are going to get in the examination. Okay. So this was about science and tech. If you have questions here in anything in science and tech, you can ask question. How to write good answer? How can we improve our answer quality? Okay, so let's look at the second part of our paper 3, which is ecology and environment. Very quickly I will discuss because I have limited time now. So you know the framework now. I'm simply going to discuss few of the topics. जो exact syllabus है हमारा वो ये है, biodiversity and environment, conservation, environmental pollution, degradation, and then environmental impact assessment. So that does not tell you a lot, but the environment का syllabus again बहुत ज़्यादा है. जैसे climate change खुद में एक बहुत ही important topic है, where we go into details of climate change, causes, consequences, steps taken at global level as well as at national level, where you know about international agreements on environmental issues, चाहे pollution हो, climate change हो, waste management हो. Overall, the entire issue of conservation, so significance of forest ecosystem, wetland ecosystem, significance of water conservation, mangrove ecosystem, all of that becomes a very important theme. And last but not the least, the recent environmental laws and policies which have been in news, इस पे हमारा एक focus होगा. इसी में हम एनर्जी को भी फिट कर सकते हैं. आई हैव इंक्लूडेड एनर्जी इनटू साइंस एंड टेक, बट आई कैन आल्सो फिट एनर्जी हियर एंड आई कैन आल्सो फिट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट हियर, बट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट विल बी डिस्कस्ड सेपरेटली. यहां पे भी कोई भी जब आप आंसर लिखोगे, भले इन्वायरमेंट का आंसर है, आई एक्सपेक्ट, again depending upon requirement of the question, but generally I would expect 4 layers in your answer. अगर आपका क्वेश्चन खाली इकोलॉजिकल डायमेंशन मेंशन डिस्कस कर रहा है, इट इज नॉट इनफ. व्हाट इज हैपनिंग टू इकोसिस्टम, स्पीसीज साइकिल जो भी है, but I will add that economic dimension, that how ecosystems improve the livelihood of people, local people, indigenous people, right? Livelihoods, ecosystem services, trade, all of that. जैसे फॉरेस्ट है, मैंग्रोव है, वेटलैंड्स हैं, कोरल रीफ्स हैं, हाउ दे इंप्रूव द लाइवलीहुड ऑफ लोकल पीपल. आई विल एड दैट सोशल एस्पेक्ट, हु बेयर्स द कॉस्ट ऑफ एनवायरमेंटल लॉस, हु इज कॉजिंग द एनवायरमेंटल लॉस, हु बेयर्स द कॉस्ट ऑफ एनवायरमेंटल लॉस. We clear mangrove if, let's say, some cyclone occurs, who bears the cost of that cyclone? Again, local people. So I will talk about that social dimension, and I will of course also talk about that policy and governance, that what is government of India doing, or for that matter if you have some important global agreement, जैसे wetland की बात है, I will definitely write about Ramsar. Climate change की बात है, I will definitely write about Paris Agreement, right? So if you have some policy governance angle at national or even at global level, I will definitely add that. तो हमारा आंसर में 4 मिनिमम लेयर तो होना ही चाहिए. इकोलॉजिकल लेयर, इकोनॉमिक लेयर, सोशल लेयर, पॉलिसी लेयर, ये 4 चीजें पक्के से होनी चाहिए. एंड इवन इफ देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन अबाउट, लेट्स से, सम ग्लोबल एग्रीमेंट, इंडिया जो है एक एंकर होना चाहिए हमारा, राइट? तो दैट शुड बी देयर. ऑलवेज बी स्पेसिफिक. सेम थिंग इन साइंस, सेम थिंग जो मैंने साइंस एंड टेक में बोला है, जेनेरिक वर्सेस स्पेसिफिक, that will give you that 1 extra marks in every answer. Always focus again here also on convergence, the same thing which I mentioned in science and tech. Same thing, ecology to livelihood to governance, society, that convergence is important. Linkage between global and India. The recent data, अभी के रिपोर्ट्स, 2025 के रिपोर्ट्स, 24 के रिपोर्ट्स, 26 के रिपोर्ट्स, 2010 के रिपोर्ट्स, नो. एंड बैलेंस्ड क्लोज, ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. डोंट बी एन एक्टिविस्ट, यू आर नॉट एन एक्टिविस्ट, राइट? आपके बारे में जैसे मान लो, व्हाट डू आई मीन बाय दैट, कि बहुत बार जो हम देखते हैं कि इन्वायरमेंट इकोनॉमी में एक डिबेट है, दैट हम बात करते हैं इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ का, दैट कम्स एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ इन्वायरमेंटल डिस्ट्रक्शन. एंड आप बिल्कुल एक्टिविस्ट आपके अंदर का आ गया कि इकोनॉमी के नाम पे हम ये कर रहे हैं, वो कर रहे हैं. डोंट डू दैट. यू आर गोइंग टू बी अ ब्यूरोक्रेट. आप बताओ, जैसे निकोबार के बारे में अगर क्वेश्चन आता है इस बार, अगर आप एक्टिविस्ट हो गए, सोनिया गांधी का जो एडिटोरियल था, अगर आपने वहीं लिख दिया, वहां पे जाके नहीं नंबर मिलेंगे आपको. आपको बताना पड़ेगा कि वाई दैट निकोबार प्रोजेक्ट, वाई दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. आप बताओगे उसका एक इकोनॉमिक एस्पेक्ट है, उसका एक स्ट्रेटजिक एस्पेक्ट है, आप उसको इग्नोर नहीं करोगे, राइट? आप भले क्रिटिसाइज करो अबाउट, एंड अगेन ये भी एक पता नहीं क्या है कि गवर्नमेंट को क्रिटिसाइज नहीं करना चाहिए, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. एक करने का तरीका होता है. हाउ डू आई क्रिटिसाइज समथिंग, उसका एक तरीका होता है, राइट? तो एक्नॉलेजिंग डेवलपमेंट वर्सेस कंजर्वेशन ट्रेड ऑफ, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है. ये एक्नॉलेज करना जरूरी है कि इंडिया, हमारा एक एथिकल ऑब्लिगेशन है दैट वी बिकम अ रिच नेशन. बहुत गरीब लोग हैं भारत में. इट इज एन एथिकल ऑब्लिगेशन ऑन ऑल पॉलिसी मेकर्स, ऑन एवरीबडी हु इज इन पावर, दैट पीपल कम आउट ऑफ द पॉवर्टी, राइट? तो आप ये एक्नॉलेज करना बड़ा जरूरी है, ठीक है? आप कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क जो भी लिखो, बट अगर एक्टिविस्ट की तरह आंसर लिखोगे तो नंबर नहीं मिलेंगे. तो बैलेंस्ड क्लोजिंग, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, प्लीज डू नॉट इग्नोर दैट. ओके, as I said, only writing ecological layer, not being specific, forgetting that human dimension, right? Not talking about that India specific initiatives, closing without a named scheme, some things like that. Those things should be ideally avoided. Let me show you with examples directly. Last to last year, 2023 का क्वेश्चन है, 15 मार्क्स का क्वेश्चन है. Comment on the National Wetland Conservation Program initiated by Government of India. Name of few India's wetland of international importance included in the रामसर साइट. 15 नंबर का क्वेश्चन है. खाली नाम लिख के अगर आप आगे चलेंगे नंबर नहीं मिलेगा आपको. क्वेश्चन में है ना, नेम फ्यू इंडियाज. फर्स्ट एंड सेकंड सेपरेट नहीं है. आपको जब कमेंट करने को बोला गया है तो आपको बताना पड़ेगा कि वेटलैंड्स इंपॉर्टेंट क्यों है, एंड फिर रामसर साइट्स का सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है. सो व्हेन द क्वेश्चन इज आस्किंग दैट नेम अ फ्यू, do not just name them, write few details about them, right? what is the significance they have, where are they located, are they facing some sort of threat. If you have 3-4 एग्जाम्पल लिखो लेकिन उसको थोड़ा इलेबोरेट करो, that will be a much better answer rather than simply listing 10 Ramsar sites and going to the next question. It's a 15 marker question. 10 number में फिर भी मैं expect कर लेता. In 15 marker question I will not expect that. Okay? तो एक implicit demand भी है question का कि are we actually protecting our Ramsar sites? What type of problems our wetlands facing right now? How can we overcome those problems? तो ये वाला part जो है थोड़ा सा आपको लिखना पड़ेगा. जो comment है, that demands analysis. Whenever the question is about comment, it is not asking you to take some sort of opinion. जैसे if the question is critically examined, the question is forcing you to take a stand. If the statement is examine only, not critically examine, then statement का अपना एक basis है, उसके आप counter argument में लिखोगे, लेकिन generally बहुत बार ये होगा कि examine में होगा कि जो statement दे रखा है उसको आप बताओगे कि हाँ ठीक है, there is a lot of weight into that statement which is given. In critical examination, you are forced to take a stand. In comment, analysis is required. Don't think that comment is some generic thing कि हम कुछ लिख के चले गए. Analysis has to be given. Significance of wetland, National Wetland Conservation Program, mandate, scope, achievements, India's Ramsar site, landmark examples, write about the threats, write about the gap. ये हमारा कंप्लीट आंसर है इस क्वेश्चन का. अगर आपने खाली जेनरिक आंसर लिख दिया आगे नंबर नहीं मिलेंगे. सो इफ आई एम राइटिंग, जैसे आई टॉक अबाउट द इकोलॉजिकल सिग्निफिकेंस, आई टॉक अबाउट द इकोनॉमिक सिग्निफिकेंस, आई टॉक अबाउट द सोशल सिग्निफिकेंस, लीगल aspect, that wetland rule, or the fact that India is a signatory to Ramsar Convention. Right. If you have specific examples, write down those examples. And while writing those dimension, you can add that data. अभी जो 2026 का data है ये, India has 99 Ramsar sites, largest in Asia. Lost 33% wetland in 3 decades. Write about that how we have 2 in Montreux record, Loktak Lake and Chilka Lake. I give these examples. So the moment you अब यहाँ पे देखो एक environment पे सबसे बड़ा benefit पता है आपके पास कब आएगा? जब आप अपना prelims का knowledge use करोगे यहाँ पे, कि prelims में जो आप फैक्ट्स की तरह चीजें याद रखते हो वो बहुत ही हेल्पफुल होगा आपका मेंस आंसर राइटिंग में. ट्राई टू यूज दोस फैक्ट्स इन द आंसर राइटिंग इन अ रेलेवेंट क्वेश्चन. इंडस्ट्रियल पोल्यूशन ऑफ रिवर वाटर इज सिग्निफिकेंट एनवायरमेंटल इशू इन इंडिया. डिस्कस द वेरियस मिटिगेशन मेजर्स टू डील विद द प्रॉब्लम एंड द गवर्नमेंट्स इनिशिएटिव इन दिस रिगार्ड. अनदर, दिस इज अ 10 मार्कर क्वेश्चन. मिटिगेशन मेजर, गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव, 2 अलग अलग चीजें हैं. आपने दोनों को साथ में मर्ज कर दिया. डोंट डू दैट. मिटिगेशन मेजर एक बात कर रहा है कि व्हाट टाइप ऑफ सॉल्यूशंस आर रिक्वायर्ड, एंड देन आप लिखोगे कि गवर्नमेंट जो है क्या कर रही है. ठीक है, ये 2 अलग अलग चीजें हैं. 2 हमारे सब हेडिंग ऑलरेडी बने हुए हैं. तो जब हम इसका आंसर लिखेंगे, सब हेडिंग स्केल ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल रिवर पोल्यूशन, पहला जो स्टेटमेंट है उसको हम जस्टिफाई करेंगे. इंडस्ट्रियल पोल्यूशन ऑफ रिवर वाटर इज अ सिग्निफिकेंट एनवायरमेंटल इशू इन इंडिया. ये जस्टिफाई कहाँ से आएगा? ये आएगा, हमारे पास डेटा है. आई नीड अ प्रॉपर आर्टिकुलेशन हियर. 45% ऑफ इंडियाज रिवर पोल्यूटेड, सेंट्रल पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड का रिपोर्ट है यहाँ पे. मिटिगेशन मेजर, व्हाट आर द टेक्नोलॉजिकल सोल्यूशन, व्हाट आर द इकोनॉमिक सोल्यूशन, गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव्स, एंड फाइनली एक कंक्लूडिंग सा रिमार्क कि व्हाट मोर कैन बी डन, बिकॉज डिस्पाइट द इनिशिएटिव्स थिंग्स क्लियरली आर नॉट इम्प्रूविंग. सो व्हाट मोर कैन बी डन, दैट कैन बी अ कंक्लूडिंग रिमार्क. When I write about environmental dimension, talk about specific pollutant. Industrial pollution खाली छोड़ दोगे. Talk about specific pollutant. Talk about how do we measure. I do not have to define what is BOD, but I will write that BOD of many river water is high. I will write that river systems like Ganga, Indus, Brahmaputra, they are suffering from heavy metal pollution such as arsenic, nickel, uranium. I write those specific words, and that will fetch that extra marks. I will talk about the economic cost, कि industries पे जो treatment का cost है, जो penalty cost है, they would rather pay penalty than go for treatment. तो क्या है, penalty बढ़ाओ फिर. यही है ना कि अभी treatment cost महंगा है, penalty सस्ता है. फिर क्या, क्यों हम उतना ज़्यादा specific treat करें. I will talk about the institutional capacity जो है, that is limited. CPC, BSPC does not have enough resources, enough people to enforce the legal remedies which already are available. And I will mention about the legal remedies such as Environment Protection Act, Water Act, National Green Tribunal के orders हैं, Zero Liquid Discharge mandate है, ये already है mandates, but mandates हम fulfill नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. So I will give the examples of Namami Gange, I will give the example of Zero Liquid Discharge, I will give the example of Environment Protection Act, Water Act. ये सारी चीज़ें हमारे second part का होगा, that what initiatives have been taken by Government of India. And in the concluding remark, I will definitely talk about that how can we improve this situation, because currently despite all of that mechanism, things are not improving. A question on climate change. Discuss global warming, mention its effects on global climate, explain the control measures to bring down level of greenhouse gas emission which cause global warming in the light of Kyoto Protocol. 15 marker question, not 10 marker, 15 marker question. अब यहाँ पे भी देखो ये फर्स्ट एंड सेकेंड पार्ट इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट है. कहीं से ये नहीं है कि सेकेंड पार्ट जो है, तो अगर आपने क्योटो थोड़ा सा बस खाली मेंशन कर दिया और थोड़ा डिटेल में एनालिसिस पार्ट पे आप नहीं गए, तो अगेन आपके आंसर्स, अगर इस फर्स्ट पार्ट को आपने करा, ज्योग्राफी बढ़िया नॉलेज है आपके पास ज्योग्राफी का, यू हैंडल इट वेल, बट इफ यू डिड नॉट हैंडल दैट सेकेंड पार्ट वेल, मार्क्स विल बी रिड्यूस्ड. तो यहाँ पे हमारे जो सब हेडिंग्स है बहुत क्लियर है. I briefly talk about global warming and then I immediately talk about climate effects. I mention how it is impacting, let's say, cryosphere. I mention how it is affecting oceans of the world, how it is affecting the ecosystems such as forest ecosystem, wetland ecosystems. So and the question is not, and if I have examples, for example, सबसे बढ़िया तो यही होगा कि इंडिया स्पेसिफिक एग्जाम्पल्स आप लिख दो. जैसे हम बात करते हैं ग्लोबल क्लाइमेट सिस्टम की, हम बोलेंगे कि हाउ ओशन करेंट्स आर बीइंग अफेक्टेड, हाउ विंड पैटर्न्स आर बीइंग अफेक्टेड. आप बोलोगे कि कैसे मानसून अफेक्ट हो रहा है, कि एग्जांपल हमारा इंडियन मानसून हो जाएगा, राइट. मरीन हीट वेव्स इन इंडियन ओशन हमारा एक एग्जांपल हो जाएगा. हीट वेव्स इन इंडियन मेनलैंड, दैट विल बी एन एग्जांपल. सो इफ यू हैव सम ग्लेशियर्स have disappeared, Arctic is on the point of no return. The moment I write those specific example in writing global climate system, your answer becomes better. And to improve that articulation, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड का जो लेवल है 430 पार्टिकल ppm है अभी एज ऑफ नाउ, 421 2023, एज ऑफ नाउ इट इज ऑलमोस्ट 430. प्री इंडस्ट्रियल लेवल वाज 280. ये अगेन ये क्वेश्चन इतना सबको, सब लोग इन्वायरमेंट पढ़ते हैं, सब लोग इसका आंसर लिख के आएंगे. आपको जो एक्स्ट्रा एज कहाँ से आएगा? व्हेन आई राइट दैट स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट, व्हेन आई मेंशन दैट व्हाट IPCC assessment 6th assessment report talks about the current increase and how it talks about the possible futuristic scenarios by end of this century. I write that. I write about Kyoto Protocol के जो specific mechanisms थे. I will talk about that clean development mechanism. I will mention that US did not become part of it, Canada did not become part of it, and Kyoto Protocol fundamentally it did not work that well. I will talk about this because वो भी second part में हमको वो भी highlight करना है that what happened overall, the role of Kyoto Protocol. One last question. This was asked in 2024. What role do environmental NGOs and activists play in influencing environmental impact assessment outcomes of major projects in India? Cite 4 examples with all important details. अब ये अगर आपने जेनेरिक आंसर अगेन लिख दिया कि रोल क्या है, आपने EIA का फ्लो चार्ट बना दिया, नॉर्मल पता है आपको, EIA सब पढ़ के जाते हैं, यू राइट अबाउट फ्लो चार्ट बना दिया, बट यू डिड नॉट मेंशन दैट NGOs कौन से स्टेप पे इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करेंगे. जैसे NGO जो है स्कोपिंग पार्ट पे, स्क्रीनिंग पार्ट पे, पब्लिक पार्टिसिपेशन पार्ट पे, EIA रिव्यू पार्ट पे, हर लेवल पे काम करेंगे और हर लेवल पे उनका रोल अलग अलग होगा. स्कोपिंग पे उनका रोल क्या होगा, स्क्रीनिंग पे उनका रोल क्या होगा, पब्लिक हियरिंग के टाइम उनका रोल क्या होगा, EIA रिपोर्ट रिव्यू पे उनका रोल क्या होगा. हर पार्ट पे आपको लिखना पड़ेगा. एंड देन यू हैव टू ऑल्सो राइट दी 4 एग्जाम्पल. सो इफ यू डू नॉट मेंशन दोस 4 एग्जाम्पल, जैसे वेदांता केस बहुत फेमस है, कूदनकुलम न्यूक्लियर प्लांट बहुत फेमस है, RA फॉरेस्ट जो मुंबई मेट्रो वाला पूरा कांड था वो बहुत फेमस है, अभी छत्तीसगढ़ में माइनिंग को लेके जो था वो फेमस है, हैदराबाद में जो फॉरेस्ट क्लियर है वो बहुत फेमस है, अरावली में जो चल रहा है दैट इज अ वेरी फेमस एग्जाम्पल. तो हम बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स पिक कर सकते हैं. एंड ट्राई टू पिक द मोस्ट रिसेंट एग्जाम्पल एंड ट्राई टू पिक द मोस्ट पॉपुलर एग्जाम्पल. चिपको का एग्जाम्पल आप ले लो, अगर आपको और कुछ नहीं याद आ रहा तो चिपको का एग्जाम्पल ले लो, चिपको मूवमेंट का एग्जाम्पल ले लो. सो pick very prominent examples from past and the most recent examples right now, and that is how you write a good answer in this particular question. But I would expect you to make a flowchart of EIA, and within that flowchart I would expect you to write that what role NGOs will play in this, in this, in this, and in this, in screening, in scoping, in screening, in public hearing, in final review, and give those examples. And that is how you write a good answer in this particular question. I'm going to get this slide uploaded also. Some current affairs topic. I was expecting a question in prelims, but prelims में नहीं आया, तो this becomes more important in mains now. India का जो updated NDC है 2026, not 2025. And जो carbon credit trading scheme है. Prepare this entire topic. Overall हमारा जो updated NDC है, and जो carbon market की हम बात कर रहे हैं, I do expect a good question in mains examination on this particular theme. I write very specific targets. Remember, if the question is about updated NDC, if I write कि हाँ we are trying to reduce our emission intensity, that will not fetch you marks. How much reduction? 47%. I mentioned that 47% reduction, 60% non-fossil fuel. I write those specific points. When I talk about carbon credit trading scheme, I mentioned that how this is an amendment to Energy Conservation Act, how it is trying to create a national carbon market, how it is going to subsume that PAT scheme, that perform, achieve and trade scheme. I mentioned those details of that scheme, and that will fetch me extra marks. So that environmental aspect, economic aspect, legal aspect, social aspect, all of that with specific articulation, scheme. I also have a global dimension here, that COP29 में जो हमने बात करी climate financing की, and India का वहाँ पे क्या stand है. I compare about what is EU doing, what is India doing. EU का जो carbon market है, India का जो carbon, I give a compare there. So I will prepare this topic holistically in a way that if I have to articulate, if I have to improve the articulation, I can use those examples in the answer writing. And last two, current affairs theme, जो पूरा focus है critical minerals mission 2025, that there is so much of focus on that economic independence, that self independence, आत्मनिर्भर भारत, versus उसके कारण जो पूरा का पूरा एक ecological tension है, चाहे वो lithium mining हो, cobalt हो, polymetallic nodules in ocean हो, तो उसको लेके जो ecological concerns हैं, and यहाँ पे हम कैसे एक balance बनाएं कि हमारा एक strategic requirement as a nation versus the environmental questions which it raises, and how should we think about this entire issue then. And one last theme, that related to climate change, that how climate change is impacting heat waves, overall urban heat islands, and what is our policy response to this entire issue. This is a very specific theme, that climate change and how it is impacting day-to-day life and how it is impacting marine heat waves. And यहाँ पे भी हम जितने specific examples use करेंगे articulation के लिए, उतना हमारा better होगा, ठीक है. जैसे Lancet का report है 40,000 plus heat deaths in India in 5 years, right? Hottest year on record 2024. So if I write those specific data points, that will again fetch that extra marks in the answer. Okay, so that's it. This is what I had to discuss in this particular session. That how can we write good answer in science and tech, good answer in environment. Always think about, as I mentioned in this framework, that did you exactly identify, did you decode the topic properly? Topic के जो main demands हैं, both explicit and implicit demands. Have you identified that? Have you identified the directive keyword? And based on the directive keyword, what expectation UPSC has from you in your answer? Have you picked the right architecture, right subheading? Have you scanned dimensions, that pestle plus which I mentioned, 10 marker हो, 2-3 dimension कम से कम, 15 marker हो, 4-5 dimension कम से कम, ऐसे हो, 7 से 8 dimension कम से कम. ये हमारा framework होगा, in 10 marker, 15 marker essay. Do you have precise data, example, scheme, convergence among various themes, are you doing that in your answer? So when you write next answer, try to focus upon such type of things. Okay. If you have doubt, if you want to show some of these answers which I like the questions I gave, you can send me a mail. And I also update Science and Tech Current Affairs on Telegram, so you can follow this on Telegram. All the best, guys.
Where our mains Edge 45 comes to their rescue. We have very limited time between prelims and mains. Very dedicated guidance, answer writing, continuous mentorship.
Good marks, good rank is equivalent to answer writing practice.
So it's like a proper lab, as the name itself says, where you can experiment, learn, and excel.
So it's relevant, it's specific, it's well researched, and it's in a proper framework which you can use in answers.
And this is where mentoring plays a very important role. So that will be one aspect of mentoring where faculty will continuously engage with students who are enrolled.
The idea here is not to impart knowledge and content to you. If you people are writing mains examination, I'm dead sure that you people have already done that hard part. And we'll be covering them from the perspective of what questions UPSC has asked and what it can possibly ask related to those particular schemes or themes in the coming years.
The biggest mistake in UPSC prep, thinking that more material equals more marks. You don't need more material, you need a system that works. At Vision IS Delhi, our GS Foundation course is built to move you from confusion to clarity. Here's how. Right sequence. We teach subjects in an order that actually makes sense. So you don't just memorize, you understand. Integrated current affairs. No more separate notes. Use PT 365 and Mains 365 to link news directly to your syllabus. Early testing. Don't wait for the exam to find your gaps. We test and give one-on-one feedback from day one. Stop counting study hours and start counting your progress. Targeting UPSC 2027, build the foundation that toppers trust. Upcoming Delhi batches live and online available. Karol Bagh 8 May 11 am, 14th May 8 am, 22nd May 5 pm, 27th May 2 pm, 29th May 11 am. And GTB Nagar 15th May 6 pm, 22nd May 8 am. To register, visit our website or call us on the given numbers.
Good afternoon. You all have an idea about GS3? What is the idea? Economics का क्या idea? Economics, science and tech and environment. So I think the session is done. What is the idea about economics? Conceptual. क्या है concept? Though I discussed this in the previous session, how to revise effectively for mains, I'll tell you the difference between prelims and mains and how exactly it is not conceptual in mains and it's all application based. Even in prelims nowadays, they're not asking the concept directly, it's all application based. Now the first starting step of reading economics is that you try to understand how a particular economy works. How that economy works, we try to read about concepts of growth, development, concepts of money, banking, the relation with rest of the world, and the role of the government. Primarily this, थोड़े topics और इसमें हम to understand the concept we read about poverty, unemployment, and financial sector. Now this is where we build the concept and this is where we build the understanding. This is what is required in prelims. This is the first start of preparation. All of these topics have absolutely no relevance in mains. This is where the difference between concept and its application. Whatever we read in prelims, specifically the starting point of it, is not something which is going to be asked in the mains exam in any of these topics. So nobody is going to ask you define GDP. Nobody is going to ask you the 3 methods of GDP estimation. There is no discussion on what the concepts are. What the discussion is, if these concepts have to be applied, that means we need to study in detail about what exactly is the Indian economy. So first, the change in pattern, the change in framework is that we have to move beyond the concepts and we have to now work on the application of the concepts. And in this application, this whole Indian economy, there has to be an analysis and there has to be an evaluation. Why it is happening like this, how we can make it better, what are the proposed solutions. So the topic of this whole understanding and revision has now shifted to application, where we have to build on our analysis and evaluation. The benefit on this is that this analysis and evaluation has to be built on specific topics, which is given in the syllabus, and from these topics their PYQs will give us the dimensions. So the first preparation strategy is that you need to know what topics and what dimensions. Once you have the topics and dimensions, this is where you're going to have specific content, and once you have specific content, you'll be able to write. So the first major framework change is no more the things are on understanding, it's on application. And when we apply whatever we've understood, we talk about what is being done, why it is being done, and how we can make it better. We are going to do 2 things, analysis and evaluation. Government is doing it better, or how you propose solutions. Why is it like this? These are the 2 things. And these 2 things on what all topics, on that particular understanding, the topics are going to come from the syllabus. So this is something which you ought to know. When you know the topics, you draw the dimensions from the previous year questions, you will be able to prepare specific content. You have specific content, you'll be able to write. So the first stage where we are going to spend time. So this whole shift of preparation we have already discussed in the previous class. Not going to tell more on this. We've already done this 1.5 hour class. What we'll try to do is today try to understand what topics there are, what dimensions there are, and from these dimensions how we have to prepare that specific content. In this specific content, I'll tell you 4 things what needs to be prepared, and this would be specific to each topic and dimension. This specific content would first have the analysis and the evaluation part. Second, it would have data to make your arguments, make everything more specific. Third, case studies or examples. And fourth would be these 4 things is what we require on every topic. Not all topics would require the 4 things. Some topics would require, say for example, the first topic we'll discuss. ये तो हर topic में चाहिए. Analysis and evaluation is something which will require on every topic. But what we will use selectively data, case studies and government schemes. So for what topic needs data, what topic needs case studies and what topic needs government schemes, they're all very different. So I don't need all the 4 in every area. Definitely I need analysis in all the 8 whatever the topics are, but these 3 things I'll need selectively. For example, I'll show you in the first 2 topics, that is growth, development, planning and employment in India. These are the 4 tag words written there. Those 4 things would require some data. There would not be a lot of case studies or examples there. When we come to agriculture, when we come to PDS, I would require less data but more case studies and examples. I talk about agriculture, there would be requirement of government schemes, similarly in industrial policy and infrastructure. So the matrix of topic preparation or content preparation would focus on these 4 things. Some areas I would require this more, some areas I would require this more. There's no blanket data collection. There's no blanket the government schemes or the example collection. There's nothing blanket which you need everywhere, specific to each topic and dimension. So I'll spend most of the time in telling you what the topics are and what the dimensions, and so that you are able to prepare your content accordingly. What has to be done in the content are these 4 things. We'll see one by one what the topic and its syllabus are. The topic mentioned in the syllabus, these are your major topics. I've drawn them into 5 different categories. First is planning resource, mobilization of resource, growth and development in India. Second is inclusive growth, third is government budgeting, fourth is agriculture. I've drawn 2 parts of agriculture, one is the cropping pattern, the other is subsidy. Food processing, land reforms, industrial policy and infrastructure. So 5 different heads which have to be prepared separately. First head is these 2, which are interconnected, which talk about growth, development and employment in India, which is also common with inclusive growth. With the help of questions, I'll show you the dimensions of each so that you are able to prepare content effectively. That's the first major head. Every year, there are 2 to 3 questions which will come from this head. This is the second most important topic after the topic of agriculture, both policy-wise and general agriculture. The second head is government budget and taxation. In the last 10 years, there have been roughly 5 questions in this. So 1 year they might ask questions, 2 years they might skip. So this is a topic which they have not covered frequently. But yes, it has appeared in the exam. The third type of a topic, which includes 4 things: cropping pattern, irrigation techniques, supply, transportation and storage, and e-technology. This is the platform which is giving you the maximum questions in the last 10 years. 2 to 3 questions, sometimes 4 questions will come from alone this topic of agriculture. Agriculture has the maximum coverage in main syllabus, but agriculture questions are not uniform. There are 2 distinctions. One is the understanding what is agriculture in India in terms of its cropping pattern, in terms of what irrigation techniques are. Third is what is marketing. Then the technology used. Maximum questions which they have covered, I have covered from these 2. Cropping pattern and irrigation. On the face of it, it looks very basic, very generic questions, but they're very specific questions which would require specific content. Both this section and the third section require specific content. The questions are generic. Generic question में specific content लिखना is what gets you marks. We try to read the generic question and expect कि ये तो हो जाएगा, but when we start writing, you will always write a generic answer which is going to get you 3.5 marks. This is why GS3 becomes less scoring. Because you have to prepare specifically about the cropping pattern, you have to prepare specifically on irrigation. Similarly, these topics, I'll give you the dimensions. The other one is the policy front. The policy front of agriculture would mean what is the government doing for subsidies in terms of pricing policy and the government doing for food security. Just like this has questions every few years, there are some questions. Similarly, this topic also has questions every few years, 1 or 2 questions. This topic is not as relevant as what this agriculture is. There are 1 to 2 questions, but across different years they have been spread. In government budgeting also and in subsidies also. This 1 question is spread across years. ये हर साल नहीं आता. Every year what question they are going to ask is planning, inclusive, or this growth and development, inclusive growth, and this part of agriculture. This is which we have seen every year they have been asking. Next is food processing and land reforms. 1 question each from both these topics. These are low hanging fruit. Same question every year. Scope, significance, government schemes on food processing. Land reforms, why they were successful. And second type of questions, 1 or 2, land sealing, why it should be done, why it not should be done. Similar type of questions in food processing and land reform, 1 or 2 question here. Then you have 2 things, industrial policy and infrastructure and investment models. In the initial first 5 years, maximum focus was on investment models. And we talk about investment models, we are talking about public-private partnership. There used to be conceptual questions. Infrastructure is mostly driven by schemes in different sectors. Now they've combined the 2, where they've talked about PPP in certain sectors also. They're talking about PPP in airport, PPP in rail transport, everything which is a combination of investment and infrastructure models. Industrial policy and liberalization in the last 5 years, they've asked 2 questions last year itself, where this industrial policy, pre-reform and post-reform, evaluation of the 2, or post-reform, what is the scheme or policy in industry right now. 2 questions last year were asked. One was on the PLI scheme and the other was on semiconductor mission. So if we see from the syllabus, these are the 5 to 6 different heads: growth, agriculture. One is the general agriculture, the other is policy specific agriculture. Government budgeting and taxation, seldom seen in one of the years. Similarly, food processing, land reforms, this is the 4th segment. And the 5th segment is infrastructure and industrial policy. I'll give you the breakup of dimensions also. So everything needs a specific preparation. जो यहाँ पे data चाहिए, this data is not required here. This requires analysis or even examples or schemes. The schemes would be less here, more data here. So everywhere the content preparation for each topic has to be separate, has to be more specific. When it becomes specific, your answer writing will become specific. So the pattern of preparation, if you see of GS 1, 2, 3, 4, GS 1 and GS 3 are more content specific. In history, you can't write something whatever. The question is specific, the answer has to be specific. Similarly, in geography, the question is specific, the answer has to be specific. Same goes for GS 3. Economics, science and tech and environment, all the 3 subjects are content heavy. So the content specification has to be there. It has to be specific to what the question is. GS 2 and GS 4, the writing skill is what matters. Somewhat in the first paper society also, but GS 2 and GS 4 is where writing is more prominent than what the content is. It's not that the content is not important, but GS 1 and GS 3 are more aligned together in terms of content preparation. So these 5 heads, when you have specific content, it will be easier to write answers. If you don't have content, no matter what answer writing you do, you're not going to score marks above an average. And above an average is where you won't get any selection. So the content specific preparation has to happen in GS3. If it doesn't happen, answer writing doesn't help much. Answer writing is less important here as compared to content collection or content preparation according to what the total is. If you prepare on these 5 heads, you will not face a problem in answer writing, which we can't say for GS2, GS4 and also the social issues part. वहाँ content होगा, उसमें answer writing का skill चाहिए. यहाँ skill कम चाहिए, इसमें you need content preparation which is more specific to whatever they are asking. I'll tell you how exactly to prepare that. These are the 5 broader heads. Now the first major head is growth and development. I'll first show you the questions so that you get an idea what the questions are. These are the 3 topics mentioned here. One is planning, resource mobilization. This is less important right now because after 2014, government has done away with planning. There's one body called Niti Aayog. One of the years in the last 10 years, they've asked question on Niti Aayog. There's just one question in the last 10 years. Growth and development in India and employment. These are the 2 areas which they have picked the maximum. I'll show you how exactly and what dimensions they have covered. These are the questions in the last 10 years from this. I'll show you. First read the questions, I'll show you what the dimensions are. What are the challenges before the Indian economy when the world moves from free trade to protectionism? How can the challenges be met? That means we are talking about impact on growth coming from external agents. If free trade and protectionism, these 2 things, what is the impact on Indian economy? So in totality, the impact on Indian economy from external front. This is one dimension, growth and development coming from globalization. What are the causes of persistent high food inflation? Comment on the effectiveness of RBI's monetary policy to control it. This is not related specifically to inflation. This question is more about macroeconomic stability. Again, something related to growth and development. Faster growth requires increased share of MSMEs in GDP. Comment on present government policy in this regard. GDP growth comes from different sectors. One sector is agriculture, the other sector is manufacturing, and the third sector is services. Manufacturing, MSME, why it is important. So dimension is again growth and development, the broader. I'm going to more specific. Most unemployment in India is structural. Examine the methodology to compute unemployment and suggest improvements. Related to growth development, the third topic was employment. So the question is asking about most unemployment is structural, methodology to compute unemployment and suggest improvements. Distinguish between care economy and monetized economy. How can care economy enter monetized economy through women empowerment? Measurement of growth, we measure something, we don't measure another thing. Economic growth has been led by increase in labor productivity. Suggest growth patterns that create more jobs without compromising productivity. Now if you see from the broader range of questions, what the dimensions are. In labor productivity, well also I'll tell you how they have drawn this dimension. We are talking about 3 things. Growth, development, planning, and related to it is jobs. These are the topic which is mentioned in the syllabus. Now see how they are bringing in questions on what two platforms. Growth and development, both, ideally the growth is measured through this, is measured through a concept of GDP. Development has separate indicators, that's a separate understanding matter, but how exactly they draw questions from this. GDP can be understood from expenditure, where we talk about consumption, investment. This is the first dimension where they ask questions. First question was, what is the impact on this if world is moving away from free trade and is moving towards protectionism? This is the impact of globalization. What is the impact? Suggest measures. This is the first theme which they have asked, which is the first dimension. Another dimension that can be picked from this is, why is investment not increasing in India? Investment is two types. Investment is private investment. Investment is government investment. What is the government doing? Is it investing in capital assets or not? Is it putting money in PSUs or not? Government here putting it in PSUs. Government here putting it in infrastructure. Private investment can be domestic and private investment can be foreign. So automatically your theme is related to growth. It's related to globalization, which they have asked twice in the last 5 years. Second, it relates to investment. What exactly is the role of investment in the economy and why this is not, again, analysis evaluation. What is happening to consumption? This could be the third dimension. 3 dimensions which you have covered from the topic of growth and development by segregating India's growth comes from what sectors in terms of expenditure. जो दूसरे type का dimension which can come from this is GDP can come from agriculture, GDP can come from manufacturing, and GDP comes from services. A dimension, this is B dimension. I showed you 2 questions here. One, why is manufacturing important? And second, MSME schemes in this regard. This is one type of a question. Second question was, India's economic growth is coming from labor productivity. Labor productivity is nothing but services. So why coming from services? Explain. How can we have more creation of jobs along with labor productivity? The दूसरा question, or same question का second part. So one type of questions will be on investment outside, how import export. अब इसमें same question will happen. What will be the impact of the US-Iran war? वो सब पे impact है. यहाँ impact है, यहाँ impact है. What is the impact of trade deals? What is the impact of trade war? All of these themes are coming back to growth and development through this only. Other, if I go structural different sectors, I will have these type of questions. Why manufacturing important? MSME का government का scheme क्या है? Services, labor productivity is creating growth. How can I create a growth model which has both productivity and jobs? So why I need both manufacturing and services? So one type of a question would be on sector basis. The other type of a question would be broader impact of these events on these things. Whether it is impact of investment, impact of export import, impact on consumption coming from external or domestic reasons. It could be both. Analysis का part यही है. But what type of questions are they asking? They are asking question on these 4 and they are asking questions on sectors. So now my content will become very specific. When I ask this, these 2 frameworks A and B, what type of content do I need? First, I will need to collect content on analysis and evaluation. This is something I need. This is how I will understand कि US-Iran का क्या impact है इन 4 factors पे. Second, do I need data to add sources or make my content, make my argument more specific? Yes, I will have to remember some data on what could be the impact on consumption, how much can it reduce, what is the percentage of investment that it can increase, what is India's export and import from what countries. So this particular topic has to be heavy on 2 things. It has to be heavy on analysis evaluation, has to be heavy on data. Are there any case studies or example in this? This is something which is absent. Why Indian economy is unique in its own? You don't need to copy someone else. You have to work with whatever solutions the government is proposing. The fourth thing is, do I need government schemes? What the government is doing to do that? Definitely the government is suggesting something. ये way forward भी होगा और question direct भी आ सकता है. Problem, analysis of its problem. They make it problem more specific and give a solution. This is how exactly the content will be prepared on growth and development. When this growth and development, you have an idea what is happening. A और B prepare हो गए. One is, who is going to do it? Whether the government will do it or private sector will do it. If the government will do it, how the government will do it? This is where the relevance of Niti Aayog. One question can be, what is the relevance of Niti Aayog here? This is what is the topic of planning. Already they asked difference between Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. What they can ask is, what is Niti Aayog doing right now? Or analyze the functioning of Niti Aayog. This becomes my third theme. What is the relevance of planning today? And the planning body in India is Niti Aayog. Once this analysis of problem sector-wise, analysis of problem expenditure-wise is done, you know who is going to correct it or what exactly is their solution going to be. What is the impact on jobs? Jobs, how is it measured? Different sectors and quality of jobs, where we talk about automatically आपका fourth dimension बन गया. So growth, development, planning and employment. These are the four dimensions which you will get. This is a topic which does not have any static content. This is a topic which is mostly current affairs related. You don't have any static content in this. Static content is in, say, food processing industry. Static content is in land reform. Static content is in agriculture cropping patterns. Static content is in irrigation. There's no static content here. This is all last 2 years ka current affairs hai, whatever you can compile. Then newspaper reading comes in, where the magazines come in, where the compilation of yearly magazines come in. But those things you will be able to use when you know what type of questions there are. So, four broader dimension ban gayi. One is the expenditure front, the other is the sector front, the third is the planning front, and the fourth is the job front. Every year, 2 to 3 questions on this. If you use this particular framework, I'll show you more questions. ये सब इसी में fit हो जाएगा. Explain the difference in computing India's GDP before and after 2015. The first, measurement of GDP. Right now also there has been a change in methodology. Automatically this becomes a probable question. Do you agree that Indian economy experienced a V-shaped recovery? Post-COVID, this was the question. Now V-shaped recovery again, CIGX minus M. So automatically your sector analysis, either you go agriculture, manufacturing services, or you go this. Both ways you can solve this question. Define potential GDP and its determinants. What factors have inhibited India from realizing its potential GDP? GDP comes from where? Why India has not got its potential GDP? I'll tell you one more thing here. This growth and development measured through GDP, what are its factors? वो आएंगे यहीं पे वापस. What are its factors? How will any country gets its growth? This is the understanding part which you have to apply. Any country gets its growth from this is mostly prelim specific what we do. So now what is potential GDP? Why, what are its determinants? And then why India is not achieving it? Why India is not achieving it? You can take this as the fifth dimension. कि factors क्या हैं जो growth development determine करता है? इसका application is asked. Though it comes down here itself, investment के से related as up, but we can still take it as a separate dimension. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Jobs भी इसी से related ही है. It's going to come from these two dimensions only. Because investment will create jobs, export will create jobs. Sector wise, what sectors will give it exports, what sectors will give investment, again you will have the job component, labor intensity. This is growth development. Do you agree that steady GDP growth and low inflation have left the Indian economy in good shape? Steady growth, low inflation, impact on consumption, impact on investment, impact on exports, impact on government expenditure. Automatically, वो 4 framework put in here. How are Niti Aayog's principles different from erstwhile Planning Commission? Another dimension of planning. Who is doing what? Niti Aayog different from Planning Commission. How would protectionism and currency manipulation in world trade affects India's macroeconomic stability? The first one. How does currency or trade reflect on export and import? What is its reflection on investment? What is its reflection on consumption? Coming back to the first dimension we discussed. Saving rate is the most effective factor for India's growth potential. Do you agree? What for other factors are available? The dimension just I showed you. Resource, capital goods. Capital good ही saving से आता है. So resource, capital good, technology, human capital, the population, and the fourth is government policy. These 6 factors. So वो other 5 factors. Account for failure of manufacturing and achieve a labor intensive exports. Sectoral analysis. The third dimension I told you. How has globalization led to reduction of formal employment? Is increased informalization determinantal? Quality of job. The third I told you was jobs. Usme quality. Quality is labor laws is informal and formal. So all of the analysis built on those 5. Justify need for FDI in India's development. Why there is a gap between MOU signed and actual FDI. Suggest remedial measures. Investment has 2. Government investing, private investing. Private is FDI. ये दोबारा आ सकता है साल question. Why FDI is slowing down? The first dimension. India's economic growth is often described as jobless growth. Do you agree? Give arguments in favor of your answer. Sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, services. So if you prepare these 5 dimensions well, this question you are going to solve any type whatever they are going to ask. But the content has to be specific to these 5 dimensions. The 5 dimensions which you have just noted down. This is the complete segregation of the topics just like I told you. Trade, globalization, employment, labor, women care economy, GDP measurement, MSP, manufacturing and planning institutions, which is just the breakdown of all whatever questions we have discussed. The 6 themes I differently told you. Type of questions you can read later. Ye hai topic where there is another problem. Just like we did for growth and development, the second is inclusive growth. इसके question थोड़े से different है. Again, there are 3-4 dimensions coming from this topic based on analysis of the previous year questions. Inclusive growth starts with why we are talking about inclusive growth, and it boils down to only one particular phenomenon, that is that's the first topic here. This was the first question last year. What is the difference between HDI and IHDI? Human Development Index and Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index. Why is IHDI more relevant in Indian context? Why? Because we have a problem of inequality. Second is, what is inclusive growth? Here, the concept of inclusive growth has been checked. Do you understand the concept or not? Conceptual question on inclusive growth were maximum in 2015 to 20. Third is elements of inclusive growth. Whether we talk about digital inclusion, we talk about financial inclusion, we talk about skill development, all types of questions. And finally, the approach to inclusive growth. Now this is where the questions have become more specific. There are 4 approaches how you can bring in inclusive growth. Every approach there have been asking questions in the last few years. First approach is building capability. Second approach is bringing in opportunity. Third is role of government, where it provides social security. And fourth is asset ownership. This is one dimension, this is another dimension, this is the third dimension, and this is the fourth dimension. In opportunity, in capability, we talk about human capital, education, healthcare, and skilling. In opportunity, we talk about job creation and quality. This is an overlap with the first, which we discussed, growth development. Government social security plus redistribution schemes. And asset ownership, where we talk about bringing in capital plus skill. These four dimensions, and now I'll show you the questions. From this you will relate how exactly the specific content has to be prepared. Dimensions ये चार हैं inclusive growth की. This is the topic mentioned in the syllabus, inclusive growth and issues. First, distinguish between HDI and IHDI. Why is IHDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? First, I told you why inclusive, because there is inequality. The difference between Human Development Index and inequality adjusted Human Development Index, that means you are talking about inequality. You don't have to go into the methodology of it, because it's just a 10 marker question. Why is IHDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? Why? Because we have problem of inequality. Why inequality in India? This is where you could have explained, and how IHDI gives me a better picture of the Indian society. Examine the pattern of public expenditure on social services post reforms. Is it consonant with the inclusive growth? Fourth dimension, approach. Approach mein the first I told you was capability. Capability is public expenditure on social service, education, healthcare, and the skilling services. What is the status of digitization in Indian economy? Examine problems and suggest improvements. The third, the elements of inclusive growth. Elements of inclusive growth or factors of inclusive growth, you have digital inclusion, you have financial inclusion, digitization in the Indian economy and its pattern. Is inclusive growth possible under a market economy? So state the significance of financial inclusion in, again, element plus a combination of concept. Inclusive growth karega kaun? In inclusive growth, this question they've asked twice. Of this concept, if you understand, who is going to do that? And second, what is the concept about? Is it related to sustainability or not? And what type of sustainability? ये 3 क्वेश्चन आए हैं sustainability के ऊपर. Combination of inequality and sustainability is maximum which they have asked. Investment in infrastructure is essential for rapid and inclusive economic growth. Discuss in the India's experience. Approach, asset ownership, government role, infrastructure. Explain intergenerational and intergenerational equity from perspective of inclusive growth and sustainable development. You have inequality, you bring in inclusive growth. Inequality है इसलिए हम equity की बात कर रहे हैं. Intergenerational and intragenerational within the same generation. Whether it is gender inequality, regional inequality, interpersonal inequality, across the generation, previous generation and future generation. Future generation wala hi concept hai. So to talk about inequality within the same generation, interpersonal, interreligion, interregional, inter-community groups, or gender differences. Across generations, I have to talk about intra and inter. ये within हो गई, ये across हो गई. तो inequality पे क्वेश्चन है. Inclusive growth strategy is intended to meet objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. Understanding, if you know what is inclusive growth, then only you will be able to relate inclusiveness and sustainability. Reason and what? Combination, there's a question. What are the salient features of inclusive growth? Has India been experiencing such growth? Analyze and suggest measures. Same combination of all, what, element and approaches. Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is necessary for financial inclusion. Do you agree? Give arguments. Financial inclusion, elements of inclusive growth. Comment on challenges for inclusive growth that includes careless and useless manpower in the Indian context. Suggest measures. Careless, useless, skill. Element of inclusion is financial, digital and skill. This is a question on skilling. Success of Make in India depends on success of Skill India and radical labor reforms discussed with logical arguments. Make in India तभी होगा जब element होंगे उसके inclusive के, Skill India होगा. Labor reforms, quality of employment. So you see a broader dimension, you know, all of the questions can be derived from it, but these broader dimensions have to be prepared in detail and have to be specific. If I give you these questions, you will still be able to write an answer right now, because this is broader, something generic which everyone knows. But to actually get marks, you need substantiation in your arguments, you need to provide data, and you need to have government schemes all together. So for all of these four, what you need, for all the four, why, what, elements and approaches, you'll need first, analysis is something which is a must. Do you need data to substantiate? Definitely data on these fronts, whether it is talking about job creation, whether it is talking about inequality, it's talking about gender participation, it's talking about government expenditures. Case studies and example, this is something which is less required here, and prominent is government schemes. So the first four topics, data and government schemes would be required. Why? Because your way forward will be government schemes, your solution proposed would be driven from government schemes, and your problems issues also come from what government has been able to do and what government has not been able to do. I tell you why government scheme become very important in the first two answer is, when we talk about growth, development, inclusive growth, there was a situation before government implemented something and we improved to a situation that is the present situation. I made an effort to change something, I've reached at what is. This is where the maximum questions are. What was and what is. This is the maximum questions. But what we read in the newspaper is, what was implementation, ये हम ज़्यादा पढ़ते हैं. Your newspaper is contemporary. So newspaper tells government did this. So I will tell you what exactly should have happened, because we are aspiring for something. So one type of a question is this. Another type of a question is this. This is what mostly comes from the newspaper. And this is what is something where the most the questions are. ये mismatch हो जाता है, इसलिए नंबर कम होता है GS3 में. Newspaper mostly talks about this. We need mostly this. इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमें ये चाहिए, इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमें ये चाहिए. So when people ask, should we criticize the government? You will criticize the government only when the question is asking you to. And where you are not criticizing the government, you are talking about a particular policy. But the question is never there. The question is always here. This definitely helps build the analysis, but would it be used in the question or not? I'll have to be very careful here in presenting my analysis. This is the problematic part of doing these two topics, whether it is this topic or doing this topic, and these two topics combined have the maximum weightage along with agriculture ka basic part. First question in 10 marker, first question in 15 marker is only coming from these two topics, and we falter in content because generic idea you have, but you don't have specific content. So when you prepare along these dimensions, your content becomes more specific. You know where to write data and where not to write data, so your data collection also becomes specific. So when you have these two dimensions, so now I've given you topics. This is coming from syllabus. Topic is vast. The topic dimension came from the PYQ, and from the dimension I will draw certain frameworks. These frameworks will include both things, data plus government schemes. I will try to remember them, then I will be able to write. ये stages हैं, ये prepare कर लो. Second उसका rote memory. You will automatically reach here. That will not be a problem. Problem is these two are missing. And so when you reach from topic to writing, this is a generic answer. इसमें writing skill इतना नहीं है जितना 2 और 4 में है, इतना नहीं जितना society के आंसर में है. Here this becomes important. This is why 3 is tricky, because 3 के सारे topic factual हैं. जो economics है, science and tech, environment. So if someone has asked you James Webb Telescope, someone has asked you carbon capture storage, if you don't have the framework, you don't recall it, कुछ number नहीं आएंगे, because वो specific चीज़ है. Similarly, this is also specific. You don't remember the framework is not specific, you don't get marks. So writing skill is not as important as the content is. 2-4 differs. Their content ke sath writing is equally important or more important, because content is less, expression skill matters. Here the expression skill does not. Here this matters. I hope it is making sense how exactly you have to collect content. Next is government budgeting. Now this is one topic which they've asked very less. What if they've asked is mostly they've asked the contemporary topics. See the questions, then I'll give you the framework. Explain how the fiscal health index, this was a contemporary current affairs theme. Fiscal health index can be used for assessing fiscal performance of states. How would it encourage prudent fiscal policies? This was the first time that asked a question on fiscal discipline, related to something contemporary that had happened. Distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget, explain the components of both. This is a static theme coming from prelims. Explain the rationale behind GST. How has COVID-19 impacted GST fund and created federal tensions? Again, a contemporary theme. Enumerate the indirect taxes subsumed in GST. Comment on revenue implications of GST since July 2017. Public expenditure management is a challenge to the government of India in post-liberalization budget making. Explain, clarify. Comment on changes in long-term capital gains tax and dividend distribution tax in Union Budget 18-19. One intended objective of Union Budget is to transform, energize and clean India. Analyze measures proposed. Talking about contemporary, what budget did. Last two questions were what budget did. Women empowerment in India needs gender budgeting. What are the requirements and status of gender budgeting in India? This was 2015. So from budgeting, if you see the last 10-year patterns, what type of questions they've asked? This is the dimension. Government does two things. In the government budget, I have taxation head and I have expenditure head. So the first type of question is, in a particular year. ये first type of question है. तो हर साल वो question आ सकता है कि budget में हुआ क्या है. 10 marker or 15 marker, that's the first. Second type of a question is any modification on taxes. So for example, this year the government reduced the GST. So analyze this modification. 3 questions have been asked on GST talking about the modification front. They asked about GST, impact of COVID on GST, federal tensions on GST. Reduction of GST again becomes a probable theme. When there is a mismatch between tax and expenditure, the government has a deficit, the government has a debt. This becomes the third component, because here we have to talk about fiscal discipline. These are the 3 themes which are going to be covered in the government expenditure front. इसमें से ये दोनों theme contemporary हैं, ये current affairs हैं. ये static है, ये current affairs था. इसलिए last year ये question था. Because discipline of government budgeting is something which was asked here. Another thing which can be a governance related theme, types of budget, whether it is zero-based budgeting, it is performance budgeting, outcome budgeting, gender budgeting. This is mostly a theme which is covered in governance. Types of budget. This they've asked in 2015, but post that they've not. Post that they've covered these 3 things. One question in 2-3 years, not every year. First 2 themes, government, the growth, development and inclusive growth, every year they've asked questions. This is something seldom they've asked. I've shown you from the questions also, ये जैसे इस बार GST कम हुआ है, कोई और tax government has put in, they will ask that particular current development. What the complete budget has done with respect to expenditure and tax. कहाँ पे government spend कर रही है पैसा. And discipline front where they had asked a contemporary theme of this. Types of budget is a governance related theme. Gender, outcome, performance budgeting, zero-based budgeting. That we do there. One question, but not necessarily these three. This covers the topic of government budgeting. Now this is where the maximum questions lie. These 4 topics: crops and cropping pattern, irrigation systems, transport, marketing of agriculture produce, e-technology in aid of farmers. Now this is one topic, and I'll tell you the strategy changes of preparation. These 4 topics, you don't need a lot of data, and there's hardly any government scheme which would require here. Government scheme सिर्फ एक ही topic में आएगी, वो यहाँ आएगी. There are very less government schemes. These 4 are all 4 static portions which has very less current affairs, where you should have exact prepared content which you have to rote memorize. इसका question बहुत ही basic आएगा. It's just that the question is very specific. It's completely different from what we were doing before. Very less analysis, evaluation, very specific content, and the specific content has to be given there. I show you from the nature of the questions. Maximum questions here: cropping pattern and irrigation. Last 15 साल में 7-8 question irrigation पे, और same question every year. Once you prepare, you will be having that particular framework, वो हर question में fit हो जाएगा. I show you the questions itself. Explain the factors influencing the decision of the farmers on selection of high value crops in India. Cropping pattern, what decisions, why does the farmer select particular crop? Explain the role of millets for ensuring health and nutritional security in India. So 2 types of questions which they have often repeated, because millets was quite in news in 2021-2023. So 2 questions came on millets. Before that they had asked questions on rice and wheat dominant system क्यों है. Now the question could be, because of the contemporary problem, the question could be on pulses and oilseeds. There is a Niti Aayog report this year on pulses. Oilseeds, we are already seeing a problem of the war that is creating a problem. Soybean से लेकर mustard, every particular palm oil वो mix कर रहे हैं तो भी problem आ रहा है. So millets जैसे एक specific crop target किया, similarly oilseeds इस साल target हो सकता है, pulses इस साल target हो सकता है. Explain the changes in cropping pattern in context of changes in consumption pattern and marketing conditions. Why they do it? It's because of consumption and marketing is related to this question only. दोनों same question है. Similar repetition. How has the emphasis on certain crops brought about changes in cropping patterns? Elaborate the emphasis on millet production and consumption. Now, why is the farmer choosing some crop? Explain changes due to consumption. Same thing. Again, how has emphasis on certain crops brought changes in cropping pattern? Similar question every year they're repeating on cropping pattern. What are the major reasons for declining rice and wheat yield? One is generic on cropping pattern, the other is specific to some crops. Rice, wheat, millets. This has been asked. How is crop diversification helpful to stabilize the yield of crops? What are the present challenges before crop diversification? How do emerging technologies provide opportunities for crop diversification? What are the major factors responsible for making rice wheat system a success? In spite of this success, how has this system become a bane in India? What is allelopathy? Discuss its role in major cropping systems of irrigated. This was one technical question asked in 2018. We have not seen the pattern repeating. Generic question है, इसकी तैयारी नहीं हो सकती है. इनकी हम will prepare answers. What is integrated farming system? How is it helpful to small and marginal farmers? So from this particular discussion, what crops India is growing, why they are growing it, and what are the problems with this, how can we diversify. ये तो हो गया एक general question. Why farmers is growing that particular crop? ये हर साल, every alternate year they've asked this question. Second type of a question is specific crop related question. Question is on rice wheat, question could be on millets, question could be on pulses, one type of question here, one type of question here. Maximum chances of this only. How far is integrated farming system helpful in sustaining agriculture production? Same. What type of a crops and what farming system? The first type. This is cropping pattern. Irrigation systems, 6-7 questions. What are the major challenges faced by irrigation system in recent times? State the measures taken by government for efficient irrigation. How and to what extent micro irrigation help in solving water crisis? Suggest measures to improve water storage and irrigation system. So if you see from irrigation system, very basic question, present status, problems, solutions. These 3 dimensions from irrigation. Present status mein kya problem hai? Measures taken by the government to improve it. How to what extent micro irrigation will help? Suggest measures to improve irrigation system. These are the last 3 years which they've asked. What is water use efficiency? Describe the role of micro irrigation. Elaborate the impact of national watershed project in increasing agriculture production from farmers' water-stretched areas. So for irrigation, you have 2 questions, or in fact 3 types. Status. From the status, you get problems. What are the solutions proposed? In this, one question is again and again asked. Micro irrigation. वो status से याद आता है क्योंकि status में you have a problem of कि we have mostly surface irrigation and groundwater irrigation. तो उससे ही micro irrigation आ जाएगा. And fourth would be the 3 schemes of irrigation. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Combination of 1 to 3, you will get the irrigation questions. So, इसका पैटर्न तैयार हो जाएगा, इसका भी पैटर्न तैयार है. ये लो हैंगिंग फ्रूट्स हैं, सबसे पहले तैयारी इन्हीं की होनी चाहिए. And this is something which is missed in preparation because you give the maximum efforts in the first 2 topics, growth, development, inclusive growth. And this is having an equal weightage. You prepare this, again confidence increases, marks are same because question हमेशा same आएगा. Transport and marketing, similar to cropping pattern, इसके भी question बड़े generic हैं. What are the main constraints in transport and marketing of agriculture produced in India? Examine the role of supermarkets in supply chain management. What are impediments in marketing and supply chain management in developing food processing industry? Can e-commerce overcome? Word है transfer marketing, तो इसी का question ये है कि issues क्या हैं, solutions क्या हैं. What are main bottlenecks in upstream and downstream process of marketing? Assess the role of natural horticulture mission in boosting production, productivity and income of horticulture farms. How far it has succeeded in improving the income of farmers. This was just one question which was coming from a specific front on combination of cropping pattern and transportation, that was National Horticulture Mission. Otherwise what they've asked is what is the problem and what is the solution. Storage and marketing, what are the issues related to this. E-technology, one question direct which they had asked. E-technology helps in production and marketing of agriculture produce. Explain it. So marketing में 3 front है. One front is storage, the other front is transport, the third front is retail and wholesale trade. These 3 things issue, solution and government schemes, specifically for storage, transportation and retail and wholesale trade. This is where APMC and all those things also lie. Now this part of agriculture is very specific to policies. So I'll tell you how exactly they have categorized the questions here. One type of agriculture questions are on the design of agriculture in India, that talks about crops, that talks about water, that talks about marketing. This is where the maximum questions are. The other is what is the government policy in agriculture. In policy in agriculture, they have talked about subsidy, they have talked about price support, that is MSP. They have talked about distribution, PDS, and livestock. This topic had one question in the last 10 years. But doesn't mean they cannot, they can. What I want to tell you from this agriculture front is, ye wala part is missed out, and this part has the maximum questions. This part is prepared the maximum, but every 2 to 3 years there are 1 to 2 questions, not every year. Every year where you find questions is this. This shifts the difficulty part of the paper. Because this looks generic but needs specific preparation. This looks specific and has specific preparation. This is why it's easy to do. पिछले साल इन तीनों टॉपिक से एक भी क्वेश्चन नहीं था, सारे क्वेश्चन यहाँ थे, तो पेपर मुश्किल होगा, नंबर कम हो गए. इस साल अगर यहाँ क्वेश्चन आ जाएगा, इसका स्पेसिफिक प्रिपरेशन है तो नंबर आ जाता है. What you have to realize is this part first needs preparation. ये आसान है प्रिपेयर करना. This part is what needs more focus, which we have discussed right now. I'll show you questions of this only. What are different types of subsidies? What type should be given? Center gives what subsidy, states could give what subsidy. 3 types of questions in subsidy. What type? Direct, indirect, center, state. Issues with subsidy, where they ask mostly about WTO. Solution to subsidies. Price support. What? Issues. PDS. What is PDS? What are its issues? And government solutions. यहाँ पे case studies चाहिए. Different states have done different things. Questions are highlighted on these 3 fronts and they're very easy to prepare. The content बहुत specific, आसानी से मिल जाता है. इसका content थोड़ा मुश्किल है prepare करना. This is what we need. So, जो 8 में से 5 क्वेश्चन आएंगे वो यहीं से आएंगे, जिसमें से 4 क्वेश्चन ही होंगे, शायद 1 क्वेश्चन यहाँ होगा. प्रिपरेशन एकदम उल्टी हो जाती है. प्रिपरेशन सारी यहाँ है, इसका क्वेश्चन पिछले साल एक भी नहीं आया. इन दिस यू कैन रिलेट टू पीडीएस ऑल्सो. एक और क्वेश्चन है, बफर स्टॉक का क्वेश्चन आया था. पीडीएस इज रिलेटेड टू दैट. बट ये इसका कैटेगराइजेशन यहाँ होना चाहिए क्योंकि इसका भी जेनरिक है, इसका स्पेसिफिक कंटेंट कम है. You will see from the questions itself. What are the direct and indirect subsidies to farm sector in India? Discuss WTO issues in relation to agriculture subsidies. So 25 का क्वेश्चन है, 24 का. 25 में एक भी क्वेश्चन नहीं था इस सेक्शन से. How do subsidies affect cropping pattern, crop diversity in farmers' economy? What is significance of insurance, MSP and food processing? Explain various types of revolutions in agriculture after independence. How have these helped in poverty alleviation and food security? This is a general question because subsidy, MSP आए ही green revolution से हैं. So if you read about anything about subsidy, MSP and PDS, you will come to know you have to talk about green revolution only. Importance of buffer stocks for stabilizing agriculture prices. What are the challenges with storage of buffer stocks related to PDS? FCI is one which maintains it. What do you mean by MSP? How will MSP rescue farmers from low income trap? What are reformative steps taken by government to make food grain distribution more effective? The same pattern which I told you. MSP, subsidy and PDS ka similar question they ask. What are major challenges of PDS? How can it be made effective? So 3 things. PDS में challenges, reformative steps taken, how can it be made effective? These 3 things the question will always revolve. What are salient features of NFSA? Again PDS. How is it helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition? PDS के कुछ reforms हुए थे NFSA में, वो reforms पूछे. In what way could replacement of price subsidy with DBT change the scenario of subsidies in India? So they are saying, what if you remove the MSP and give a subsidy? Relation between MSP and subsidy. Given vulnerability of Indian agriculture to vagaries of nature, discuss the need for crop insurance and salient features of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. This is a type of subsidy. Government, center and state pay the premium burden. Why it is required? The question is asking. Livestock rearing has the big potential for providing non-farm employment. Discuss measures to promote this sector. There was just one question on livestock. Majorly what they have covered is subsidy, MSP and PDS. उसके भी हर साल क्वेश्चन नहीं आते. हर साल I told you is the first time, that is cropping pattern. Food processing and land reforms. First see the questions and I'll show you that this is the easiest part to prepare. Examine the scope of food processing industries in India. Elaborate measures taken by government for generating employment. Elaborate scope and significance of food processing in India. What are challenges and opportunities of food? So if you see the 3 questions, the question is the same. Scope and examine scope, measures taken by government, scope and significance, challenges and opportunities. So scope, significance तीनों में पूछा है. How can farmers' income be substantially increased by encouraging? This is opportunity, that is the significance, and this is the scope के कैसे income बढ़ सकती है. So the 3 questions are asking the same thing over and over. एक element क्या add हुआ? What are challenges and elaborate measures taken by government? So that means from the food processing sector, And they ask questions on this. From the FPI sector, there are three things you have to prepare. One is its scope, and what is its scope is nothing but its potential. That's the first. Second, what is its ये कम पूछे challenges, and third is there are three schemes. So automatically food processing industry is start. Alternate year. 1 year is this, the other year the question is on land reforms. What is the question on land reforms? Similar to this, it is also very limited domain. Land reform is why required? This becomes the introduction of most of the answers. What were the steps taken? The success of land reforms. These three questions. Why it was successful, how it changed the life of farmers, how it changed के लिए why required चाहिए. Land sealing is important or not. 5 reforms, what is land sealing? So this topic, these two topics, you'll have 1 to 2 questions every year. या तो इससे आएगा या इससे आएगा. दोनों के साथ साथ भी आ गया तो वो बोनस बन गया, मार्क्स आ जाएंगे. Just like I told you, agriculture, the first component, this component is also something which should have been prepared first. Because this is clear what the question they're going to ask. See, this is what is your land reform questions. State the objectives and measures of land reforms in India. Discuss how land sealing policy can be effective reform under economic criteria. Objectives and measures, why required? What measures? Discuss how land sealing, one type of land reform was land sealing. How did land reforms in some parts of the country help improve socio-economic conditions of marginal and small farmers? Success of land reforms. Discuss the role of land reforms in agriculture development. Identify factors responsible for success of land reform. Success of land reform सबसे ज़्यादा question है. Problem इसमें वही है, हम पढ़ते हैं क्या हो सकता था. Question आता है कि क्या हुआ है. How it is successful. This would require case studies and examples of different states. Data is less. What is more important is the case studies, and government schemes are automatically not there because they already हो चुके हैं तब. In view of declining average size of land holding, which has made agriculture non-viable, should contract farming and land leasing be promoted? Critically evaluate pros and cons. This was one question which was an anomaly from the pattern, where they had asked about contract farming and land leasing depending on the present problem of land, that is small land holding. ये एक question ऐसा अलग बना था, pattern में नहीं था. But this is something which was also prepared along with that pattern. I'm giving you the broader dimensions which they're asking. This was just one anomaly. It's not very difficult to prepare. A current affairs में बहुत बार contract farming आता है. Next is liberalization and industrial policy. 3 questions in the last 10 years, out of which 2 questions are asked last year. First, discuss the rationale of PLI. What are its achievements? How can its functioning be improved? India aims to become a semiconductor manufacturing hub. What are the challenges? Mention salient features of India's semiconductor mission. Special economic zones are a tool of industrial development. Discuss issues plaguing SEZs with respect to taxation, governing laws and administration. I'll tell you what exactly the broader question here is. Industrial policy is 2 fronts. First industrial policy is that you talk about industrial policy since independence, जहाँ पे 2 breakup होते हैं. Since independence from 1956 till 1991, there was one set of policy. From 91 till date, there is one set of policy where there is privatization, liberalization and globalization. अभी 91 और broader policies में, what is the broad policy government has? Say for example, National Manufacturing Policy of 2011, Make in India Policy of 2015, and then Atmanirbhar Bharat Policy, जिसमें government ने किया PLI. This is something which was asked last year. So one is the broader policy since independence, could be a comparison between the two, could be the present policy. Comparison where it was state-led PSU. इसी में liberalization भी cover होता है. कि पहले क्या था और अब क्या है. अब मैं broader policy पूछ सकते हैं जो PLI last year पूछी. Second type of a question is sector-specific policy, where they can ask, say, semiconductor, which was in news. Similarly, sector-specific policy is in combination with infrastructure sector, where they can ask questions on road, rail, energy, एयरपोर्ट, वाटरवेज. ये फिर कॉम्बिनेशन में जाएगा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के साथ. दिस प्लस investment model. This is how these three topics are related. When they've asked similar questions every year. I'll show you the questions also. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Industrial policy, that there was not, the question was absent in the last few years. वो पूछी भी थी तो ये पूछी थी कि ब्रॉड पॉलिसी में एक पॉलिसी थी SEZ, तो इसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन बन गया, इस पे क्वेश्चन बन गया. सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में और भी क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं. दिस इज जल जीवन मिशन, वाटर. Such type of schemes which are prominently in news. I'll show you from questions, this will make sense. What is the need for expanding regional air connectivity in India? Discuss the government Udan scheme and its achievements. So directly scheme a particular sector. Why is public-private partnership required in infrastructure projects? Examine the role of PPP in redevelopment of railway stations. So one is on the concept of infrastructure sector, that is PPP, investment model, and the other is specific sector scheme. Do you think India will meet 50% of energy needs from renewable energy? How will shift of subsidies from fossil fuels to renewable help? This is a prominent theme this year. Why? Because energy security is a concern. So infrastructure में directly energy security के ऊपर question आ सकता है, whether it is coal, it is oil and gas. Directly oil and gas can also be picked up. This is what is your breakup of the questions. Maximum questions which I was telling you was crop, irrigation and marketing, which is the most neglected portion. Why? Because we tend to prepare this. This is the last 10-year breakup. 18 questions from this, 15 questions from planning, growth and employment. This is more contemporary in nature and this is more static in nature. This is what I told you with different dimensions. Agriculture too, this is policy again, static. ये low lying areas हैं, ये inclusive growth का इसके साथ related है question. Food processing is something, government budgeting which I told you can be easily prepared, इसका contemporary content कम है. So now what has happened? The total topics and dimensions I'll tell you. Total topics were growth and development, inclusive growth, government budgeting, food processing industry land reforms, agriculture 1, agriculture 2, and industrial policy, including LPG, and infrastructure and investment models. Broader themes I've given to you based on the questions. ये अब question हो गए. You also have the themes. Now what you do is, on all these topics, you first see static and current differentiation. Automatically from the dimensions you will find these. इसीलिए वो questions दिखाएं ताकि ये differentiation clear हो जाए. Second differentiation is, once you have this, how much of analysis has to be done? This is the first. ये static current पे analysis evaluation कितना collect होगा. Second is data on specific dimensions. The same thing which I repeated first. Third is case study to specific topics, examples. And fourth is government schemes. तो हर topic पे ये 4 चीज 5 चीज ढूंढ लो. Specific content तैयार हो जाएगा, ना content की problem. Writing is not a problem. Writing is never a problem in economics because the content is very specific. It's a problem in governance, it's a problem in ethics, it's a problem in society, not here. This is how you can improve. So once you are, I hope this is done, you understand. तो अब ये page बन गए, every topic है 10 to 8 pages. Once this is done, maximum time should be spent here only. Once this is done, you start writing, and in writing, you improve your presentation. इस पे work कर लो. So when your content becomes specific because you have done this activity, automatically your marks move from 3 to 4 or 5. You improve presentation, your mark moves from 5 to. But ये 3 to 4 to 5 तभी होगा जब ये prepared है. 3 का तो अभी लिख दोगे आंसर, क्योंकि बहुत बेसिक क्वेश्चन, बहुत बेसिक पूछता है, लगता है कि सब आता है, बट कंटेंट स्पेसिफिक है. सो व्हेन यू डू दिस, यू रीच हियर. हाउ डू यू रीच हियर? प्रेजेंटेशन बिकम्स इंपॉर्टेंट. हाउ इज प्रेजेंटेशन इंपॉर्टेंट? Easy to read. जरूरी नहीं हर क्वेश्चन का you'll have bullet points. You can write small paragraphs also. But this becomes the last. What first important is this shift. For that shift, you need to do this. This and this, all the three, this is your value addition, जो topic specific है. I told you in some topics you need it, in some topics you don't need it. So generic कुछ भी data collection नहीं है, generic कुछ case study भी नहीं है, generic कुछ government schemes नहीं. For example, case study PTS के question में है, case study irrigation में आ सकता है कि state ने कुछ अलग किया. Government scheme is in irrigation. It's not everywhere. So this value addition has to be specific to the topic, dependent on how do you have read the dimensions, which I've shown you from previous year questions. What topics are important and what relevance should be given to them, you've already come to know from the last 10 years. Last year paper मुश्किल क्यों था? क्योंकि ये तो question हमेशा आएंगे. ये Indian economy का base है ये. This is they are going to ask every year. If they ask this along with this, you are in a problem. Because इसका specific content prepare नहीं है, ये तो फिर सबको लगता है storage marketing ही तो लिखा लिख देंगे कुछ भी. When they ask this and this, it becomes easy. So in combination of this, if this and this is asked, paper is easy, marks become 100, 105. It's this and this, marks become 80 to 90. So automatically relevance changes, we have to be prepared on all. इसका question और इसका question बड़ा कम आता है. 1, 2, 3 and 4. ये चार चीज हमेशा हर साल आती है. And in the last 5 years, consistently, there are 8 questions in the paper. So automatically paper और मुश्किल होगा, क्योंकि अब 12 क्वेश्चन दे दिए इन्होंने सिक्योरिटी, इन्वायरमेंट और साइंस टेक को, और स्पेसिफिक होगा पेपर. वहाँ तो आंसर लिखना ही पड़ेगा कि जो पूछा जेम्स वेब टेलीस्कोप में कुछ और थोड़ी लिख सकते हो. How vaccines are manufactured, you have to write the technology, you won't get marks. RFID, you have to write the technology, you won't get marks. I hope it makes sense how the content improvement will happen, how answer writing will happen. Don't focus too much कि आंसर लिखना नहीं आ रहा, पहले थोड़ा पढ़ लो, पहले देख लो क्वेश्चन कहाँ से आता है. क्वेश्चन देख के स्टोरेज और मार्केटिंग पे तो कुछ भी लिख देंगे. नो, यू हैव टू हैव स्पेसिफिक कंटेंट. सेम विद फूड प्रोसेसिंग इंडस्ट्री एंड लैंड रिफॉर्म्स. In case you have further doubts, you can write to me at this email address.
Where our mains edge 45 comes to their rescue. We have very limited time between prelims and mains. Very dedicated guidance, answer writing, continuous mentorship.
Good marks, good rank is equivalent to answer writing practice.
So it's like a proper lab, as the name itself says, where you can experiment, learn, and excel.
So it's relevant, it's specific, it's well researched, and it's in a proper framework which you can use in answers.
And this is where mentoring plays a very important